right, yeah, sorry. All right, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Judicial Proceedings Committee. Today is Wednesday, March 5th, 2025. I think we have 11 bills on the docket. I see Senator Zucker is here. We've got a light crowd today, but we are going to start off with Senator Zucker with Senate Bill 707. There you go.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. For the record, Senator Craig Zucker here to support Senate Bill 707. Mr. Chairman, this bill is so important. All the midshipmen is behind me, just making sure that I have the air cover I need. So thank you. It's good to see. It's good to see them here. But Mr. Chair, colleagues, this bill was brought to my attention because right now, if you were to have tinted windows, that's above 35%. You need a licensed doctor to approve it. It needs to be displayed in the windshield, and you have to renew it every 2 years. Mr. Chair, basically what happens now is you have a disability, ultraviolet rays, and you go into a doctor, and the doctor's like, yes, you have a permanent disability. You're like, thank you. And then you come back 2 years later, and they're like, yep, still permanent. So, yep, and then come back 2 years later, you're like, yep, sorry, still permanent. So what this does, Mr. Chair, and again, work very closely with state police, what this does is that if you are deemed by a licensed doctor that you have a permanent disability requiring this, that you don't have to come back every 2 years and be like, yep, still not cured, still not fixed. So not that there's a problem with it, not that it needs to be cured necessarily, but more so that we don't want to discriminate against someone like this and cause bureaucratic mess for something that could be easily solved with the doctor note. So with that, be happy to answer any questions. I think I have one person here on a panel, and other than that, as amended, Mr. Chair, there should be no opposition. And we help work with state police on the amendment. It's just technical.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Senator. Yeah, we do have one person signed up in favor. It's Adam Windham. Welcome up.
Good afternoon, members of the committee, and thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Adam Windham, and I'm here today as a father advocating for my 9-year-old daughter, Emily, who has Rett syndrome, which is a severe neurological disorder that leaves her with significant disabilities and medical complications. For my daughter, tinted windows are not a luxury, they're a necessity. One of her complications is apraxia, which means she can't always control her body movements, so she can't necessarily turn from the sunlight to protect her eyes. She also has trouble regulating her body temperature, which makes exposure to heat in the vehicle dangerous, potentially leading to extreme fatigue or even seizures. Tinted windows are critical for her safety. But the current law requiring a new medical exemption every 2 years adds an unnecessary and burdensome process for families like mine. To get this exemption, I must navigate a complicated process by completing paperwork, coordinating with a doctor's office that's already stretched thin, and then get approval from the Automotive Safety Enforcement Division. This process, which is time-consuming and stressful, is especially frustrating for families dealing with ongoing permanent medical conditions which already have mounds of paperwork to deal with. Medical conditions like Emily's do not change every 2 years. Her need for tinted windows is permanent, so why must we repeatedly prove this? The current law is an example of systemic ableism, making it harder for people with disabilities to access the accommodations they need. Families already managing complex health needs should not have these kind of burdens forced upon them. Other accommodations for people with disabilities like permanent handicap parking placards, lifetime national park passes for the disabled, or lifetime hunting and fishing license for disabled veterans don't require this kind of reapplication. If we can grant lifetime permits and passes in those cases, why should window tinting be any different? I urge you to repeal this 2-year time limit on medical exemptions for tinted windows. The current law only creates unnecessary hardship for families like mine, and I ask for your favorable report to make life a little easier for those who need it most. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Thank you, sir, for coming down. We have one question from Senator Sidnor.
Is there any idea, and this is to the sponsor, why the law was drafted with the 2-year time period?
I'm not sure, to be honest. I had some complications with this process a few years ago. And I'm sorry, was that?
No, you're
okay.
You're fine.
So I had some complications with the law a few years ago, which kind of brought my attention to just before there was a 2-year requirement. And then a couple of years ago, for some reason, when there were some changes made to vehicle inspection processes or regulations, this 2-year requirement got added in, which was not there before. And so then when I went to go deal with a vehicle inspection again, I ran into this hurdle, and it was just a nightmare to try to overcome.
Does council know when this 2-year requirement was put into place? Thank you. I'm just curious what was the reason for it, but thank you very much for your testimony.
Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. All right, seeing no further questions, thank you very much, Senator, and thank you, sir, for coming down. To the midshipmen that are watching the proceedings, this is an important part so citizens can come down and testify. You know, they have personal stories that we can hopefully help address through legislation. So it's a participatory environment, and it's really important that citizens feel free and welcome to come down here. So thank you very much, sir, for coming down. With that, that'll end the hearing for Senate Bill 707. I see Senator Augustine is here, and we were going to go with Senate Bill 808.
Thank you, Chair Smith, Vice Chair Wallstreicher, and members of the committee. Senator Malcolm Augustine here asking for a favorable report on Senate Bill 808, which is a local bill, Prince George's County Stop Sign Monitoring Systems, School Bus Stops. Members of the committee, last year, Prince George's County came through with a local bill that would allow for us to have stop sign monitoring systems near our schools and in school zones. We've had some, very challenging pedestrian outcomes in our county, and so we're trying to protect particularly our children. What this bill does is it extends that to the actual bus stops, because that's where the kids are also staying. So we want to make sure that we're also protecting our children in and near bus stops. As I mentioned, you already have a support letter from Prince George's County. Also, I'll just say that I have heard from the state highway who has asked for an amendment that would change who is responsible for the signage if these things were on state roads. Thus far, they have not been. They have not been placed on state roads because they're closer in on county roads and inside of municipalities. But I'm just checking with Prince George's County just to ensure that that doesn't create any problems. I'm not trying to create problems. We're just trying to make this protect more of our kids. Ask for a favorable report and happy to answer any questions if anybody has any.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon. Do you have cameras on your school buses?
I'm not exactly sure. I believe that we do, and Senator Charles is helping me out here. So I know that that's a part of the program. I mean, that is a part of an additional program for sure.
Okay, yeah. So if you do have them on your school buses, I'm trying to figure out what this would add to that.
Oh, it would add a whole lot, Senator. I mean, because when the school bus is not there, the kids are. They're sitting there and they're waiting for the bus. And what happens is people are blowing through like stop signs and stuff like that while the kids are there waiting. The bus is not there yet. Remember, they're there, they're milling about and everything else, but they're right near, oftentimes near the stop signs. And so we just want to make sure that people are more diligent and they're stopping at the stop signs.
Okay, and so these are stop signs outside of the school zones?
This would allow for it to be outside of the school zones and in those locations that are bus stops, because again, that's where our children are out and are waiting for the bus, and that's when they are potentially in danger. Not just, inside the school zone makes sense too. You're taking care of walkers and you're also taking care of bus stops and everything else, but we also have those places where children are congregating and waiting for the bus and or getting off the bus. Mm-hmm. So then you would get the sign for that, on the bus, but think about before. When they're there, they're waiting, they're gathered, and they're waiting for the bus. The bus has not yet arrived, and people are blowing through those stop signs.
Okay. Mr. Chair, if I may. Thank you. So a lot of bus stops aren't by stop signs. So would this be every bus stop or just
this
those
is just
that have
strictly,
stop signs?
the program is very specifically for stop sign monitoring systems. So it would only be locations that have stop signs. Okay. This is specifically a stop sign monitoring system.
And then my last question, Can you give the committee some examples of why this is necessary? Things that might have happened or that have happened? that
Well,
are
yeah,
leading you
sure.
to
I
do
mean,
this?
we've had, it was either last year, it was in and around last year where we had a couple of children that died. I mean, they were run over very close to their school, you know, and that precipitated the original bill from Delegate Healy last year, which is why we moved it and we passed it. It was in her district, which is all, we're very close and contiguous to that. And so absolutely, I mean, we absolutely have seen, and then we also just have real problems with pedestrian safety in general. I mean, pedestrian fatalities are up, pedestrian hits are up, at least inside the Beltway, Prince George's County for sure.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Just want to acknowledge the midshipmen who are leaving now today. Thank you all for joining the hearings today. Thank you. All right, we have Senator Weston Centerfold.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've got a couple of questions. So I'm looking at an amendment that was submitted in connection with the bill that says that this bill should remain effective until the taking effect of a termination provision in a prior bill. What's that all about?
I'm going to have to take a look at that one because that is.
Unless I've got I'm sorry.
Yeah, the only amendment I
This
had
is-
was from Maryland Department of Transportation. My understanding was that there was not an additional.
This says by Prince George's County Senators, amendment to Senate Bill 808.
I'm sorry. Yes, that was by our committee council. I apologize, you're right about that. Our committee council wanted to clean up the language. It was just the required language in order to, clean up the original bill. So it's technical.
Okay, it's a little confusing. It says this bill will be effective until a termination provision in last year's bill takes effect, and if that termination takes effect, then this bill is abrogated, which sounds confusing. But
It is, but they said technically that they required it. That's what committee council for the county, for our delegation, when we had it in delegation, she said that.
you need this.
We need this,
Okay.
exactly, as a technical, in order to have force.
So then I'm also looking at the information statement provided by the State Department of Transportation.
Yeah.
They've got a couple of points there. They're not happy that they would have to set up signs, and they suggest an amendment to remove the requirement for the State Highway Administration to place signs, providing notice that these monitoring systems are in use. They say it should be a county responsibility. Do you have a
Yes, and that's what
problem
I
with
was saying, Senator, that I need to go back and check with the county. And also, I've also spoken to State Highway, but when I spoke to them, I didn't actually ask them the right question because we already have speed monitoring systems and signs that are associated with them in our county. And I just need to make sure that they're doing the same thing. We want to just make sure that they're doing the same thing, and I'm fine with that. But I just didn't ask them that right question, just want to get comfortable with that, but I have every intention of doing that.
Good. And then the last thing is, it says, this is again, the DOT, says the bill does not address where the funds go after paying for the cost of administering the program. So don't you think we ought to add a provision here saying where the funds, they suggest, they support the goal of directing the funds to public safety enhancement.
Yeah,
which would seem to
again,
make
I'm
sense.
going to look to, I was going to look to where the other fines go and to better understand what we have done in statute. I mean, this is not unique, so I'm definitely, that was my intention to get clarity on
Great.
that.
And given the lateness of the hour, it probably would be best for you to send a letter to committee council
Sure,
advising them about what you found out in all these areas.
I will absolutely do that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks for bringing the bill, Senator. Good to see you. I just have a couple quick kind of just cleanup questions. So I guess annually the school systems do like an assessment, like where to place bus stops.
Yes.
Based on the number of students, like if it kind of changes, right?
It does.
So because of that, would those changes be reflected on those stop signs that if they move it, say, down to a different area, would those stop sign monitorings then be taken down and then be moved to the other locations, or would they stay up and then add to the other locations?
There is a process that already occurs for the approval of them.
Okay.
And so my assumption is and it is a bit of an assumption, I'm not disagreeing with you on that, but that there would be, that there already is like an approval, there's a secondary approval process, so it would have to be, in essence, more of a permanent stop, like what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And then that it is reviewed, right? Like that happens right now by our police department. Our police department are the ones who do that.
Okay. Yeah, so that would be like one of my concerns, is that we have it with the purpose of the school bus stop, putting them in those areas.
Yeah.
And then if that location
Well, Senator,
moves-
we also, I would also just say that we do the same thing, and we do that with the speed cameras also, where we have to change them. Sometimes if
Absolutely.
if things change.
Agreed.
And then we check, so it's not like we do that.
Yeah, I was just checking to see if
Yeah,
that
of
was going to be
course.
the case.
Of
And then
course.
the last thing I really had was the times of operation. Would they be all the time? Would it be just during school hours?
I have not changed this. This is legislation that's
Okay.
already, the only thing I'm doing here is saying our kids are not, everything stays the same. I'm literally just adding the bus stops. So whatever it was before and standing is
Yeah, and I
where-
don't even know. I just know that, like, for speed zones, for example, like they are doubled or something during school hours, or they're only active during school hours.
Yeah.
Those cameras are. So I didn't know if this was going to be something similar, where those stop sign cameras were only active during school hours. But you can get back to me later.
Okay.
It's not a big deal. But
All right.
Thank you.
Sure.
Senator, thank you very much. Further questions from the committee? All right, seeing none, thank you very much, Senator.
All right,
Thank you.
thanks.
All right, with that will conclude the hearing for Senate Bill 808. I see Senator McCray is here, and we have Senator Lamb. So Senator McCray with Senate Bill 761.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. While I'm coming up here, I got a very ambitious intern, which is a good thing, and he'll be presenting the bill. I'm going to stay here because I'm not sure if this is the correct learning ground. So like other committees have been, but like I think we have a responsibility to make sure we're creating a farm team, but I don't know if JPR is where you learn that. So I'm going to stay here with the intern. Yeah.
No, those are tough words right there, Senator. Yeah. Way to set him up for success right off the bat.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Permission to speak?
Yes, welcome. Thank you.
My name is Jacques Thompson, for the record. I'm here on behalf of Senator Corey McCray. So, dear Chair, Vice Chair, and esteemed members of the committee, Senate Bill 761 provides Marylanders with a fair and practical way to resolve civil penalties issued through automated traffic enforcement. This legislation allows individuals to include these fines in court-approved installment payment plans, an option already available for other traffic-related fines. For many hardworking families, a single penalty can create financial strain. This bill ensures that those facing automated enforcement fines have a structured way to fulfill their obligations without immediate hardship. By offering a payment plan, we help individuals avoid accumulating debt while maintaining accountability. Under this legislation, those opting into an installment plan acknowledge liability at the time of the agreement, ensuring an efficient process for both the courts and the individuals involved. If a payment is missed, the court retains its authority to take appropriate collection actions. This is a balanced, common-sense approach that upholds enforcement while recognizing the financial realities many Marylanders face. I respectfully urge a favorable report on Senate Bill 761. Thank you.
All right, excellent job, excellent job. We'll hear from the rest of the panel, and then we'll open it up for questions.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. Nina Themelis, Director of Government Relations for Mayor Scott in Baltimore City, here to testify in support of Senate Bill 761. Last year and the year before, we brought a bill before your committee that was to address chronic offenders, so individuals who have amassed $1,000 or more in civil penalties related to speed cameras. What we realized at the time is if someone's car is booted or towed and they owe over $1,000 and there's no opportunity for them to enter into a payment plan and they would have to pay that entire amount up front, that it would place an unrealistic burden on them. Separately, since those who accumulate parking tickets and fines are able to enter into installment plans when they've accumulated $150 or more, we thought that the best opportunity was for us to bring this bill forward in order to allow individuals who have over $150 or more in those automated citations to receive the same opportunity to enter into installment plans as those with parking violations, so that we're not over penalizing, but we're allowing them an opportunity to resolve those issues over a period of time that makes sense for them and their budgets. I'm here to answer any questions. I do want to just mention that we do have a couple thousand individuals who have had violations in Baltimore City who have accumulated over $1,000 in automated citations that are still unpaid to this date. Right now, the only remedy that we have is that those individuals' registrations get flagged so that they're not able to re-register those vehicles. But what we do find is those citations remain unpaid. We have citations dating back to 2018 that are still unpaid in our systems, and those individuals owe well over $150. So while people may not take advantage of this opportunity, we would be hopeful that it would just provide another avenue for them to come current with anything that they owe based upon those violations. So for those reasons, just request a favorable report on Senate Bill 761. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Thompson? So I'm sorry about this up front. I feel obligated to deliver on your senator's concerns. Now, Mr. Thompson, I just want to say you did a great job, young man.
Thank you,
That's
sir.
what I wanted to say. I support the bill. Thank you for doing that. You did a good job.
Thank you very much. Ms. Thimlis. I just wanted to be clear, this is a statewide bill, isn't a Baltimore City?
It is not a Baltimore City only bill.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I applaud you both for your wonderful testimony. And I really think it's a great idea. In theory, I don't know how, that was always in the details. But I do note that MDOT is communicating, they're agnostic on whether the bill passes, but they're just suggesting a few things that like for example, SHA recommends clarification the act of establishing a new AE payment plan does not release a flag on the driver's account with the Motor Vehicle Administration. Did you see that? And then is that something you can work with them on, or we can modify the language to make sure it's clear?
Yes, Senator McCray shared that information with me this morning, and we'll be reaching out to make sure that those concerns are resolved.
And then I really don't know how this works, but in Harford County, we have very few automated traffic, what do you call them, compliance machinery, devices. So the only thing I'm sure, I like the fact that you'll try to get more people to get in the system and pay and feel like they can get to the end point of this. Did you get any pushback at all about the idea that it somewhat puts in flux the revenue? A ticket's been issued, or a lot of tickets been issued, you know what's owed, and now you would be in sort of changing the ability of various departments to create budgets, or do you think they can just sort of readjust? They'll have to take a little time to readjust, but they'll just readjust, realizing a certain percentage of all enforcement ticket penalties will come in over a period of time.
Right. So right now, we already have a process in place for parking tickets for individuals who choose to enter into those payment plans.
And that's statewide?
That is a statewide opportunity, yes. And so we would just be able to implement this in a similar fashion. Additionally, we think that this would just likely allow us to collect money that we never would have seen otherwise, given people, I think, once they get over a certain dollar amount, they may just not want to deal with the problem face on, so giving the opportunity to pay over time.
So your hope is maybe revenues would uptick?
That's the hope.
That's the hope.
Probably minimally, but the hope is just to help everybody resolve those unpaid citations.
Thank you very much.
All right. Seeing none, thank you very much, Senator. Thank you, sir. Very, very well done. Always glad to see you. The proper training ground, come on.
Usually BMT, maybe finance,
Yeah. I know. All right. He's got to uphold that reputation. All right. All right, with that, that'll conclude the hearing for Senate Bill 761. We'll now move on to Senator Lamb with Senate Bill 967.
All right, good afternoon, members of the Senate Finance Committee. Chair Smith here to present Senate Bill 967. This is a local bill on an issue that I believe this committee should be familiar with. A year or two ago, there was a new law that was enacted by the General Assembly to allow Montgomery County as well as Prince George's County to have noise monitoring abatement systems, basically to catch vehicles that might be drag racing or have been modified to emit loud noises. And so this is enabling to the local county, and that it already exists in statute for Montgomery and Prince George's. This bill would add Howard County to that, as well as enabling, and it is just a local bill. So that's the bill.
All right. Questions from the committee? All right.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator.
Great training ground here.
Yeah, look, a smooth sea never made a skilled sailor, all right? Just remember that. All right, and it's the Judicial Proceedings Committee, not Finance, but anyway. All right, so with that, that'll conclude the hearing for Senate Bill 967. We'll now move on to, let's see, Senator Hellman is not here. Does Senator Muse want to go, or Senator Sidnor? Okay, sure. There you go. Senator, if you have your, okay, great. Senator Sidnor.
All right. Senator Sidnor, testifying on behalf of Senate Bill 941. This is very similar to bill to what Senator McCray testified on behalf of. I do have an amendment that I've worked on. I think you all should have a letter from the state, letter of information that talks about its program, which does have there's an installment plan program, but not one that's income-based. So the amendment that I have would actually strike any income-based requirements and make this installment plan program available for everyone. In addition, what the bill also does is I think we have a $250 threshold, which we will substitute and modify from $250 to $300, again, to put it in line with the program, the installment program that the state already has. So what this bill does, in essence, is it codifies an installment payment program for people who have received tickets via the Maryland Transportation Authority or the Department of Transportation. And that is simply it. There are a number of people who have these violations and the fines and fees continue totaling up and they don't pay because many times they can't pay. What this will allow the state to do is to have this installment program so that those drivers can make good on the debt that they owe for the violations and tolls that they've created. So that in a nutshell is it. I'm going to leave it up to my panel to speak and just ask for a favorable report. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Marceline White. I'm the Executive Director of Economic Action Maryland Fund. Economic Action advances economic rights, equity, and housing justice through research, education, policy advocacy. And we are here in strong support of Senate Bill 941, and I want to thank Senator Sidnor. As you said, this is a very simple bill. It addresses the needs of working families. As you all know, families across our state are struggling with the high cost of living, and oftentimes there's one more thing that just breaks their back and puts them into a vicious cycle of poverty. So what this simply does is it makes sure that people can pay their bills, but they can do it in an installment payment plan so that they can pay their bills in an affordable and sustainable way, meets the needs of the state to keep its revenue, and allows people to repay their debts. I will mention it is effective Bay Area. The Bay Area has a toll payment plan like this, and in the first 5 months, they established payment plans for $1 million in charges, and in 5 months, nearly 10% of the toll payment plan customers had fulfilled and completed their payment plan. So it does work doing this so that people can pay their debts and meet their needs. And so for all of these reasons, I'm asking for a favorable report, and I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you, Chair Smith, members of the committee, and thank you to Senator Sidner for bringing this important bill. My name's Franz Schneiderman. I'm with Consumer Auto Maryland. We're a nonprofit group that works for fairness and transparency for Maryland drivers and Maryland consumers. We're in strong support of the bill because it should help literally thousands of Marylanders deal with these accumulated toll fees and related fines and citation charges and so forth that become actually a pretty significant debt burden for a lot of lower income and middle income drivers and families in Maryland, because we have fairly high fees. There's a $25 fine for every late toll fee, and there are other fees assessed, like a 17% collection fee if it gets referred to the CCU for collection. Many drivers find themselves hundreds of dollars in debt, and in some cases even thousands of dollars of debt. Even more, Maryland is one of the few states, I believe there are only 8 in the country, that still suspends registrations or flags registrations for non-renewal as a result of toll debt, and that's not an unusual phenomenon in Maryland. WMAR-TV in May 2024 reported that 46,000 plus Maryland drivers had their registrations flagged in that way for non-renewal or to cancel or to be suspended, and it faced about $200 million in toll debt. Creating an installment plan for repayment gives people a better chance to pay their debt. It should help the state collect some monies that right now, frankly, we're not collecting and aren't very likely to collect. So thanks to Senator Sidner, and hope you'll support the bill. Thank you.
Chairman, and thank you to the sponsor for bringing the bill. My question is if it includes tolls, and then if I can give a little context for the question. I had a constituent who's a state employee who lives in Baltimore County and works here in Annapolis at the district court. And she has to travel through a toll to get back and forth to work every day. She had an issue with her Easy Pass and wound up having the different fees, the toll fees accumulate. And then with the addition of fines that happened so rapidly, it got to the point where she owed over $5,000. And it was simply for traveling to and from work every day. I entertained a bill that would put some relief for our state employees, but apparently the Transportation Trust Fund, the trust agreement, has specific disallowances for waiving fees. So we weren't able to use that avenue. But does it include the fees that come from a toll booth?
It doesn't exclude it, so tolls should be included in it. And if they are not, that's certainly something I wouldn't mind addressing within the bill.
Thank you. And if the bill gives you access to additional data, I have been curious, since we went from a live toll booth operator to this automated system, it seems like I get a lot of complaints from constituents about if you had paid it to go through the toll, then that would have been satisfied at the time. But with the billing method of sending it to you, perhaps people don't get it, aren't getting notices timely, and then the fees rack up and add on, that what we thought was perhaps a really good way to go to automate our state, maybe has for some people been really negative. And I've wondered if we've collected more money as a result of that, if it's been some sort of like odd revenue generator, because now these fees are so prevalent, whereas at first they were not.
I'm going to let Marceline, I don't have it, but I believe she does have a response for you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much for the question, Senator. It has been a huge issue over the past few years. I believe under the Hogan administration, we actually had increased the fines to $50 per violation as a way to to cost recovery and to support revenue. But people were having a lot of the problems that you are describing right now. There was legislation passed a few years ago by former Delegate Carr to reduce that cost to $25 per violation, in part as a response to all of the problems we are hearing. I think it continues to be a problem. We also get calls from people who have problems with the transponders. And so the hope is that certainly this bill would at least allow people to be on an installment payment plan as opposed to dealing with all of these fees. Massachusetts, for example, has a $5 fee for that kind of thing, and we brought ours down to $25.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate the bill. It sounds like a necessary step to make sure that there's some second chances there. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm looking at the Maryland Department of Transportation comments, which in this case are not simply informational, but more negative. And mostly what they're talking about is what they believe is going to be a significant operational and fiscal impact.
All right. That was because that was the initial drafting of the bill, which called for an income-based installment payment plan.
Right.
I had conversations with them. So actually, may have been this morning or yesterday. Days of blending, but there's an amendment that we just had drafted that, again, it modifies this from an income-based installment payment plan to an installment payment plan for everyone. That was the crux of their concerns. The other concern that was noted is they currently have a threshold where you have to have attained at least $300. Our bill said $250, so this amendment mimics what the state already has and puts it up to $300.
Okay, so you think you've assuaged their concerns?
And if after talking to them, if it's still more that needs to be done, we're trying to work with them.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Excellent. Any further questions from the committee? All right, thank you very much, Senator.
Thank you very
both
much.
Thank you both. With that, that'll end the hearing for Senate Bill 941. We'll now move on to, I see Senator Jackson's here representing the Charles County Senators with Senate Bill 912.
Absolutely. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the Judicial Proceedings Committee. If I might have my panel come up. Mr. Chair, also would like to ask for a bit of deference. We have interns in our office. I'd love to have our intern to introduce our legislation before we turn it over to the officials from Charles County. This is a local bill. The delegation, as well as the county commissioners and the Charles County Senators, all two of us, are in support of this particular bill. Senate Bill 912 deals with a challenge that we're all dealing with in our state, the off-road vehicles and the challenges that they pose to public safety on our highways. And so I will turn it over to Jordan Lewis. He is our intern slash worker in our office. He's from Charles County, so in a Towson University senior. Mr. Lewis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, members of the Judicial Proceedings Committee. For the record, Jordan Lewis, I'm Senator Jackson's legislative aide, representing the Charles County delegation on behalf of Senate Bill 912. Senate Bill 912 is a Charles County local bill that authorizes the Charles County Board of Commissioners to adopt regulation on the operation of off-highway vehicles. This bill enables Charles County to require off-highway recreational vehicles be registered with the county, to impose registration fees and impose age restrictions on the use of these vehicles, and impounding vehicles that operate in violation of the law. There has been an ongoing issue with these types of vehicles in Charles County. The Charles County Sheriff's Office has received numerous complaints about off-road vehicles driving recklessly and dangerously on public roads and on private property. Both the Charles County Commissioners and the Charles County Office of the Sheriff brought the need for this legislation to the Charles County delegation and they are looking for a means to an end to improve public safety in the county and to protect motorists and pedestrians from negligent use of off-highway recreational vehicles. Again, this is a local Charles County bill, and a letter of support should be included in your delegation packets. Additionally, we have representatives from the Charles County Sheriff's Office here today to speak to the need for this legislation. And with that, Mr. Chair, I would ask that you and the committee report favorably on this legislation, and I can try to answer some questions, but I'd be happy to refer to the panel.
No, we'll have you answer the question. Remember, a smooth sea never made a skilled sailor, so we're going to give you a lot of questions. You refine your skills here in JPR. All right. All right. No, thank you. We'll wait for the rest of the panel, then we'll take questions from the senators. Thank you. Well done.
Hello. I am Sergeant Gilroy, Charles County Sheriff's Office, the Supervisor of Community Policing. Here today, I was here to speak up. The Charles County Sheriff's Office has received the following calls of off-road vehicles in Charles County, which include ATVs, dirt bikes that are usually not registered and insured. From 2020 to 2025, we have received 5,346 calls. Last year's total was 1,076 calls. Most calls for service are for reckless driving or destruction of property. These riders show no regard for other safety on their own. Being the supervisor of community policing, I attend multiple community meetings a month. In 2024, the COPS officers have attended approximately 120 community meetings. Each meeting, the issue is brought up on how to stop ATVs, dirt bikes on the roadways, and their reckless behaviors. The citizens are worried about their safety, the children's safety, the reckless driving of the highways in the communities, and are annoyed by the constant noise and destruction of property in their communities, costing them money. It has been a difficult task to apprehend these riders. In order to stop them, officers have quickly approached riders while they are off the bike, either in hopes that they have stalled or located them at a gas pump right before they flee. In the rear of the off-road vehicles, it is rare that the off-road vehicle will stop, but in many cases, a person fleeing from police often are wearing masks, making it very hard to identify them. When they are apprehended, the off-road vehicle is not stolen. The owner is able to get their dirt bike, mini bike, or off-road ATV right back within hours. The crime has also committing are normally traffic offenses and non-arrestable except for the fleeing and eluding. I am seeking to not to arrest or place a person in jail for riding recklessly. I'm seeking to work with our commissioners to find a way to deter the behavior further. If these people are caught, if it's not, and hope to obtain a more financial repercussion or impound their off-road vehicles. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, good afternoon. My name is Jerome Spencer. I'm the General Counsel of the Charles County Sheriff's Office here on behalf of Sheriff Troy D. Berry in support of this important bill before you. This bill is enabling legislation which allows the Charles County Commissioners to work with the Sheriff's Office to hopefully address this issue that has been plaguing our community for a long time. Sergeant Gilroy discussed with you some of the issues that faces her as a law enforcement officer, and the goal here is not to incarcerate our way out of this issue. Our hope is if we get the message out that the county commissioners will take your ATV, will take your dirt bike, it will deter the behavior, and fundamentally that's what we hope will happen. We would rather deter the behavior up front rather than deal with it on the back end. So it's a very important bill. It'll provide a useful tool for the commissioners and sheriff's office to address this issue, and we ask for your favorable support.
Thank you. If I can, just a comment to the sergeant from Charles County. You can be seated. Not a question. Your sheriff, Troy Berry, is my godson. So I will tell him that you did a good job if you tell him that I was quiet and behaving myself. Deal?
Yes, sir.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think this sounds like a very reasonable solution. So I'm just going to see if you all had a chance to read the Maryland MDOT's letter, Maryland Department of Transportation. They're agnostic, but they just bring up a few things, and I don't know how they dovetail. So did anybody on the panel have a chance to read this letter yet?
No, ma'am.
So I think a couple of things they're bringing up is that apparently under current law that these vehicles are supposed to be titled, and then there's some challenges between transferring the title between a new owner and a former owner. So my question is, this, assuming they should be titled, and that's what the law is, you would like to have another layer of, another thing you have to do, which is to, sorry, let me read. Oh, okay, to register. So how does registering the vehicle, that would just be with you all locally, not with MDOT, is that correct?
So, Senator, the bill would enable the commissioners to address the registration regime. We'd have a conversation with the commissioners, the county attorneys, that's what that might look like, and presumably that would fall on the sheriff's office to run that.
Okay.
One of the things that we're thinking about, and we have a conversation with the commissioners, would be a voluntary registration program. Part of the issue involves to do recover an abandoned ATV off-road vehicle. Who does it belong to? How do we track that?
Right.
It's been registered with the county, with the sheriff's office. Well, now we know it was actually yours. It was stolen. We can contact you about that. We also have a better way to prove when somebody comes in to claim their ATV or dirt bike. Sometimes now they might have title initially, but because it's not required to be registered, how do we know it was your ATV to come in? Maybe it was stolen, maybe you're driving, we don't know. So the voluntary registration program would allow that process to go more smoothly. Ultimately, the commission may decide not to go down that road at all. It's simply an option available to them.
Just a clarification, it's your thought that there could be a stolen off-road vehicle, but the person who stole it actually has the title too? I don't know where you keep the title for these vehicles, but.
No, the police officer know better than I, but I don't think that's the case.
So what you're going to do, basically, whatever MDOT's saying, you'll look at this, you'll work with them, you'll try to make your local registration or whatever mechanisms you put in place. You just want that flexibility to create this program to help you better deal with the challenges and safety issues you're happening now.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
Can I talk to the intern for a moment?
Yes, sir.
So first of all, how tall are you?
I'm 6'4".
And secondly, you probably aren't aware, but today is Towson Tigers Day.
Is it?
It is.
Oh, I did not know that.
And I'm sure that's why you were selected to present your testimony today, because you knew it would fall on favorable ears here before our. Thank you. Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
All right. Seeing there are no more questions, thank you all very much. This concludes the hearing for Senate Bill 912. Next, we will be hearing Senate Bill 863. Senator Muse.
And I have two. Gentlemen, let's come right up, please. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman and the members of the Senate Judicial Proceedings Committee. For the record, I'm C. Anthony Muse, representing the 26th District in Prince George's County. I have two panelists who are joining me today, Mr. John DeRose, Vice President of Enterprise Holdings, and Mr. Bill Castelli, RWL Lobbying Firm. This is a very simple bill. Senate Bill 863, Motor Vehicles, Rental Fleet Vehicles Registration, provides the Motor Vehicle Administration with the necessary framework to allow rental fleet owners to, number one, utilize stickerless vehicle registration, and number two, obtain dedicated plates for their fleet vehicles. This legislation actually modernizes our vehicle laws to accommodate the unique operational needs of rental fleets. As you can imagine, rental fleets are inherently dynamic, frequently moving across state lines. Traditional vehicle registration methods, which rely on physical stickers placed on plates, are ill-suited for such a fluid system. Applying and tracking stickers for thousands of vehicles spread across multiple jurisdictions creates unnecessary logistical challenges, which increase administrative burdens for both rental companies and state agencies. Therefore, Senate Bill 863 will provide a modern and sufficient solution. Fleet plates would serve as a uniform and easily identifiable marker for rental vehicles, simplifying the law enforcement identification and enhancing compliance monitoring. Additionally, eliminating the need for physical stickers reduce the risk of loss, damage, or delays associated with mailing, receiving, and applying registration tags. This streamlined approach allows rental companies to redeploy vehicles swiftly based on the market demand. The streamlining approach allows rental companies to redeploy, beyond operational efficiency. This initiative offers significant financial benefits. The state could realize cost savings by eliminating the production and mailing of physical registration stickers. Furthermore, the proposal includes a fee for the initial issuance of dedicated fleet plates for vehicles registered under this system, creating a new revenue stream for the state. However small it may be, it produces that. In conclusion, transitioning to stickerless registration and dedicated fleet plates for rental car companies aligns with modern transportation needs, reduces logistical complexities, and creates a win-win scenario for both the rental industry and for the state. So for these reasons, I respectfully urge a favorable report on SB 863. Thank you for listening. Whoever wants to go first.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is John DeRose. I represent Enterprise Mobility. We own and operate Enterprise National and Alamo Rent-A-Car, as well as several other business transportation lines in the state. We have 100 locations across the state, approximately 1,500 employees, payroll of over $83 million. And an estimated registered fleet in Maryland of 37,000 cars today. Our total impact in the state is just over $177 million annually. The Senator, and thank you, Senator, for introducing the bill, did an outstanding job outlining what this bill does. It's really simple. It really just gives us the framework to exchange the sticker process with a fleet tag, increasing efficiencies on both sides. And as he mentioned, it would be a win-win both for the fleet operators and for the state of Maryland. One of the things I think that we can look at from a revenue standpoint, there's an 11.5% rental tax in Maryland today on rental cars. When we have to ground these cars, which is very frequent when we re-register the cars, to have the stickers chase the cars, which could be anywhere throughout the state and frankly, it could be anywhere in the country. These cars are then grounded, not generating revenue, which then the state loses that revenue opportunity as well as we do. So again, it's a very simple, straightforward bill. It appears to be a win-win situation, both efficient, from an efficiency standpoint and from a revenue standpoint. We respectfully ask for a favorable report on the bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee, and thank you to our sponsor, Senator Muse. I did want to address the point about revenues to the state. The fiscal note, you will note, does have a slight cost to it in the initial years. We think there might be some confusion on the fiscal note because this would not result in a reissuance of plates. So they're not going to take their existing fleet, switch out all those plates. This is prospective in terms of when new plates are issued. So just as they would do now, instead of getting like a normal plate, they would now get a fleet plate instead. So there should be no additional cost at all to the state for this. And there would be some revenue to the state from the initial application for the fleet plate. Encourage a favorable report.
Thank you very much. Senator McKay, then Senator James.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. One of the questions that I have, either for the sponsor or for you, Bill, or whoever.
Yeah.
So a couple years ago in the state of Florida, tourists were being targeted.
Yep.
And how can you prevent that, or does this have anything to do with that?
So, great question. I've been in the rental car industry for 37 years, and when I first started, the rental cars all had bumper stickers on them. So you'd rent a car and it'd have a 12x3 bumper sticker that would say Alamo Rent-A-Car. Literally, just telling everybody, hey, there's a tourist driving this car around. tourist areas were the areas where this typically occurred. It wasn't based on the tag. It was really based on the bumper stickers that most of the companies applied, and we applied them as well. Enterprise did back in those days. Then we switched from the bumper sticker to a little tiny E on the trunk. Those are now gone. So these fleet plates wouldn't identify the cars as a rental car. It would be a fleet car. So we don't, there's 10 states so far that have switched over to this process in the U.S., and there hasn't been any issues at all like that. So, but it was more of a bumper sticker issue back then.
Okay.
Yeah.
If I may. So my question for you, sir, is I don't think it, let me preclude my question. I don't think this has anything to do with this, but having a fleet car and having that tag that's just going to stay there all the time and not have to be renewed.
Yeah.
Will that have anything to do interfering with insurance, that someone who is renting the car or self-insured or any of that?
No. No, it's the same process. It's the only difference literally would be instead of getting just a regular Maryland plate today, we would get a Maryland fleet plate. Everything else is exactly the same. The insurance is the same, the process is the same.
It's not going to interfere with anything from your company's standpoint of trying to get information of who the insurer is and all that?
Yeah, all processes remain the same.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Senator James.
Thank you. And my colleague more or less asked the question I was interested in, so I just want to envision it. MDOT's talked about the Florida incident with tourists and said, there's 3 states that are doing plates.
Yes.
There's an interesting sort of middle ground with Louisiana. It looks like they have just sort of maybe it's a little more discreet is what I'm thinking, a line at the bottom of the plate that says commercial without it telegraphing, and then several others have a sticker, but it's a unique sticker. I get, now that I heard the testimony, the sticker.
It's the sticker issue.
Is problematic, but tell me what you envision, because I kind of with my colleague and what happened, I don't want to reopen up or provide any risk to anybody that is using a rental car by telegraphing that in some way that's unnecessary for anything. And law enforcement or others will be able to discern it. So I'd like to know how discreet, what you envision for this plate and how discreet you can make it to protect people that use them, but also allow others to know what kind of car it is.
Yeah, I mean, simply, we're open to anything. I mean, for us, the issue, as you mentioned at the beginning of your question, really is to move away from the sticker process.
I get that.
So however the plate really is constructed isn't that important to us. It doesn't help our business, hurt our business, whether it's the most discreet marking you can have on there, whatever's allowable.
Okay.
We're perfectly fine with it. Yeah.
So I guess it's your understanding that whenever we allow for this flexibility and you're allowed to do this, you work with MDOT.
Correct.
Or MVA to figure out the kind of plate that
We're
would.
wide open, yeah. It's really just getting away from that, putting the sticker on and chasing cars all over the country.
Well, I don't want to try to amend the bill, but I do hope you will be mindful that why invite a problem? So to the extent you can be as discreet as possible and still getting what you need without the sticker and some permanency, I hope that's the direction you go.
100%.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Since there are no other questions, that will end the bill hearing for Senate Bill 863. Next, we shall have Senator Love for Senate Bill 949.
And may I bring up Phil Dorsey from MVA for info only?
Sure.
Thank you. Nice to see you. You too. Yeah, of course. Sorry?
There's
Yeah. Here we go. Have a seat. Great. Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of JPR. For the record, Sarah Love, here to present SB 949, Vehicle Laws, Fully Autonomous Vehicles. If enacted, this bill would authorize the use of autonomous vehicles on Maryland roads. Yes, we are talking about vehicles with no human driver. We hear a lot of heavy topics here in JPR, so I'm excited to bring you something different. SB 949 creates a legislative framework, a robust set of rules that an autonomous vehicle would need to meet to legally use the roads in Maryland. It authorizes the Maryland Motor Vehicle Administration and the Maryland Insurance Administration to establish the standards and requirements necessary for autonomous vehicles to operate safely here in Maryland. There are also provisions to include our first responders and public safety officers, so they have the training, protocols, and understandings of how these vehicles work and what interactions with autonomous vehicles would look like. And while this topic may be new to some of us on JPR, it is most definitely not new to our agencies nor to many other states. Since 2015, MVA has chaired the Connected and Autonomous Vehicle Work Group, bringing together industry, first responders, safety advocates, and government to work on this issue. To date, 25 states have passed substantially similar legislation, including our neighbors, Pennsylvania and West Virginia, as well as other states such as Florida, Michigan, New Mexico, and Texas. A complete list of other states is attached to my testimony. In addition, Virginia and DC are looking at passing similar laws. By passing SB 949, we would join those states in creating the conditions necessary for autonomous vehicles on our road. I want you to know that AVs are a part of everyday life for hundreds of thousands of Americans every month. Whether they be passengers who cannot drive themselves or do not wish to, they can access autonomous vehicles, providing them freedom of movement and additional choice with how to get around and interact with the world. Autonomous vehicles offer a safer alternative for those who could be subject to the biases of a human driver, including members of the blind community who have many stories of other ride-sharing drivers refusing to pick them up. And I'm honored to have many of them here today who will testify. We hear a lot of bills about adding cameras to address drivers who are speeding, who are rolling stop signs, who are driving distracted. Autonomous vehicles don't do that. Nor do they drive drunk, get tired, or respond emotionally to other road users' conduct. As a result, in states where they currently operate, data show that autonomous vehicles are significantly safer than a human driver. Before I close, I want to let you know that we have two sets of amendments. The first was developed alongside the MVA and MIA to ensure that the bill will allow them to effectively regulate what for Maryland will be a new industry, including the ability to pull them off the road if they are found to be unsafe. You should already have those, but if not, we'll make sure that you do. And the second set of amendments will come as no surprise to any of you. These are amendments to guard the privacy of both the riders and those around these cars. In order to operate safely, AVs have a lot of cameras and collect a lot of data. So the amendments will ensure that the data collected is not sold or traded, that no facial recognition is used, et cetera. So in closing, SB 949 is a foundational piece of the puzzle in expanding transportation options for all Marylanders. To be clear, by passing this bill, we will not have AVs on the road tomorrow. This is the first step. This is the legislative framework. The second step is the regulatory framework. The third step is bringing in the businesses and setting up that industry. So for the foregoing reasons, I respectfully request a favorable report on SB 949, and I'll turn it over to my panel. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair Smith and distinguished members of the committee. It is my pleasure to come before you today and offer testimony in support of Senate Bill 949. My name is Craig Rogers. I'm here representing Waymo. I'm a resident of Tacoma Park, Maryland, where I live with my wife and 2 children. First, I want to give you some background on Waymo and then discuss the importance of this bill. Waymo is an autonomous driving technology company with a mission to build the world's most trusted driver. For 15 years, we have worked tirelessly to build the Waymo Driver, the technology that powers it all. And today, we are operating a fully autonomous ride-hailing service in San Francisco, Los Angeles, Phoenix, and Austin, with Atlanta and Miami soon to come. Autonomous vehicles are not science fiction any longer. We are providing 200,000 paid, fully autonomous trips every single week with no one behind the wheel in those cities. And we are incredibly proud of our safety record. The data to date indicates that we are improving road safety in the communities where we operate. And in fact, based on 33 million miles of driverless operations, the Waymo driver has reduced injury-causing crashes by 78%. That is the equivalent of avoiding 100 crashes in the communities where we operate. And this is especially important because Maryland sees 550 vehicle fatalities every single year. AVs can be part of the solution, and we really see the opportunity to address how many of these avoidable tragedies can, in fact, be avoided, as Senator Love discussed. This important traffic safety bill will bring Maryland up to speed with the other 25 states across the country that have authorized the use of autonomous vehicles, which is critical before we bring this service to Maryland. On behalf of Waymo, I would like to thank Senator Love for her interest in this topic and MVA's innovative team for their years of thoughtful leadership in this area. I urge a favorable report on Senate Bill 949. Thank you.
Outstanding testimony from the gentleman from Tacoma Park.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. My name is Arlen Upshaw, and I am counsel to the Autonomous Vehicle Industry Association. I really appreciate the opportunity here to testify in strong support of SB 949. As my colleagues have discussed so far, autonomous vehicles have been an aspiration for decades. For years, many have questioned, when they would be on our roads. Today, we can proudly answer that they are here now. AVIA members have driven more than 70 million autonomous miles on public roads. That's equivalent to 293 round trips to the moon. The ongoing deployment of AVs really across the country is demonstrating how the adoption of AV technology will benefit the public. The U.S. Department of Transportation has repeatedly reaffirmed that human behavior is the cause of the overwhelming majority of crashes, contributing to over 40,000 deaths on our roads each year. That's roughly equivalent to a plane crash every day in our country. Maryland alone saw over 600 traffic fatalities in 2023. In comparison, AVs, they don't speed, they do not text, and they don't drive impaired or fatigued. AVs are very well positioned to combat the nationwide trend of unsafe driving because they have this unparalleled 360-degree visibility of the world around them. As a result of advanced technology that forms what's called the automated driving system, and that's the brain that drives the vehicle. AVs have now built a significant safety record through more than a dozen years of development and deployment. This safety record is supported by data that's collected by the federal government, which requires AV companies to report incidents no matter how minor or who caused the incident. A framework that allows for the driverless deployment of the AV technology is necessary to realize these benefits. 25 states, as we've discussed, have laws that expressly authorize AV deployment. Like this bill, those laws allow AVs to operate with or without a human driver, provided that very specific requirements are met. For these reasons, I strongly recommend supporting this bill. Thank you.
Thank you for the bill sponsor for bringing the bill. And I understand that my line of questioning runs the risk of 20 years from now sounding as outdated as people who thought, can computers do math, or should we still have people do it by hand? But it's not my area of expertise, so I do have just a few fundamental questions so I can be educated on the bill. Would there be any sort of, I guess, a threshold? I get that all manual cars are not the same. I drive a Jeep, my mom drives a luxury vehicle, and her car drives different than my car. Is there some sort of commonly accepted minimal standard of what the technology needs to be to make these cars safe and functional?
So that I'm going to leave to the experts. Do you want to address that? Can you come to the podium, please? Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Phil Dacey. I'm here from the Maryland Motor Vehicle Administration, and it's a good question. Under the bill, there are permitted SAE level vehicles, so MVA's role in this bill, should it pass, we do have amendments to the bill, that were mentioned, that we think gives MVA a stronger role in the regulatory process for them. But for these types of vehicles, but the way it would work is if you have a vehicle that you wanted to operate autonomously, you would present information to the MVA. We would, under regulation, require something called an operational design domain. You would give us the information on where, what the capabilities of your vehicle are, where you want to operate it, and under what circumstances. And that could be like it only operates in this geographic area, or on streets that are under 35 miles per hour, or during the day, no nighttime driving, those kind of things. So the operator would submit that operational design domain to us. We would approve it. We would issue a registration to that vehicle that says autonomous vehicle, which would indicate that it does not need a driver. And that is only available for the SAE levels 4 and 5 under this bill. So there's a standard 0 to 5 scale for vehicles. And at the higher end, 5 is you don't even need a steering wheel or windshield or anything like that. But level 4 is capable of operating without a driver within that operational design domain. So for vehicles that are either a level 4 or a level 5, we would then issue a registration and they'll be able to operate. We intend to work with our first responders in providing information about those vehicles. That's also contemplated by the bill, as we would coordinate those first responder plans. So we would kind of act as a conduit and a communication for communication with the local governments and the first responders. It's kind of a role that we do now with the permitting process that we have a permitting process since 2015 to test these vehicles. And we have successfully been able to do that multiple times under the testing process, serve that coordinating role with the local governments and first responders based on the capabilities and the operational design domain of the vehicle itself.
That touches on my second question. The process of inspecting the vehicles and making sure that they continue to perform in the ways that they're designed. This committee heard testimony yesterday, totally unrelated, but we had some MTA bus drivers, and they talked about some of the safety mechanisms for their vehicle, things that they should be able to activate and alert the control tower that we need help and we need assistance. And in one of the testimonies, there were 3 different mechanisms that person attempted to activate, and all of them failed. Due to some sort of technical function, they weren't exactly sure why. When these vehicles would be inspected, do we have the capacity to do the sort of inspecting that would say all these systems are functioning in the way that they're designed?
Another good question, but yeah, so the way that would work for us would be if it's only new vehicles are not required to be inspected in Maryland, and so it will only be upon transfer. They would go through the safety inspection process with the state police, and you know, we could potentially through regulation add something in a regular inspection requirement, but I don't know if you wanted to. Sure.
Thank you for the question, Senator. With Waymo's sensors and technology, we have 29 different cameras. We have LiDAR and we have radar mounted on the vehicle. We put those on the vehicle ourselves. We mount them and assemble the vehicles, and we're constantly calibrating them in our warehouses. This is a big piece of Waymo operating a service, is we have highly skilled technicians, sometimes working jobs that just didn't exist 10 years before, working at that intersection of autonomous vehicles, electric vehicles, and sensors. And they're constantly calibrating our sensors, making sure that they are equipped and ready to use before our vehicles go out on any given day. And that's part of our regular operations schedule.
And that's done by the company that manufactures the vehicle?
That's done by Waymo, so we do that ourselves. We own and operate.
I'm familiar with Waymo.
Yeah, we own and operate the vehicles.
Okay.
Currently, our fleet is a mix of primarily Jaguar Land Rovers, the I-Pace, Jaguar I-Paces. We equip those with sensors ourselves, and we manage the vehicles in depots, and we charge the vehicles, we calibrate the sensors, and we get them ready for operations every day. So we're constantly working on them and making sure they're ready for operation before they hit the roads.
Okay.
One more thing, you mentioned you weren't familiar with Waymo. I will tell you, I wasn't either. They run a ride share, so think Uber or Lyft in a certain jurisdiction. My niece actually took one, and this is not a commercial for them, but she took one in San Francisco, and she said it was the coolest thing. And she felt very safe. And it's, as he mentioned, they're in 4 jurisdictions now in a defined geographic jurisdiction. And you can say on your app whether you want an autonomous vehicle or not. So if that helps you kind of visualize what we're talking about. And then, did you want to address the safety issue as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for the question. I just wanted to add another quick point on this, just within the bill itself. It's really built upon 3 pillars. They're the specific requirements that an AV would need to meet in order to operate on the roads in Maryland. They'd have to be able to comply with all federal safety, applicable federal safety standards. They'd have to comply with all traffic laws that are applicable as any other vehicle on the roads today. And they have to be capable of achieving what's called a minimal risk condition. That is essentially an engineering term that is used across, widely used across the industry. That means a low risk condition if the AV, cannot, continue the trip in a safe way. So if it encounters something that it really hasn't seen before, which is particularly unlikely given how much training has gone into this, it has to be capable of that, and if it can't operate on the roads. So that mostly goes to your first question, but yeah, I just want to make that up.
Thank you. And then my final question, are there requirements that the passenger or the person in the vehicle is a licensed driver? And I ask this question because I had an unfortunate incident of witnessing an awful traffic accident. They had to land a helicopter on the highway, and all traffic was stopped in both directions. And we were instructed by the police officers that responded to use the shoulder of the road to drive the opposite way down, to then go through a break in the median, to then go the other way down the highway. And I'm thinking nothing in the maps or programming would ever think that you should U-turn in the middle of a highway, drive down the shoulder, cut through a median, and then go someplace else. That sort of thing is incredibly hard to program and train for. So what about a requirement of the person who is the passenger being there? And then my second concern on that is certainly safety. Could you put a 2-year-old in this and say, go away, drive to wherever you want this person to go to, and how do we kind of manage and monitor? We know a 2-year-old's not going to be, hopefully, behind the vehicle of a car. You have to manually operate, but how do we keep the safety element, and then how do we have that backup fail-safe of a licensed driver being in the vehicle in case you need to manually override to do something unusual?
Thank you for the question, Senator. As I mentioned earlier in my testimony, we now have 33 million miles of experience with passenger operations. So we have encountered an incredible amount of driving situations. And just to give some context, 1 million miles is what we drive every single week with people in the back seat. This is driverless operation. And it would take the average American driver 75 years to get that much driving experience. And just for a Maryland context, 1 million miles is the distance from Deep Creek, Maryland, on our West Virginia border, all the way to Ocean City. So that's 3,205 times driving back and forth. So a ton of travel experience. When we encounter situations that are challenging, like you mentioned, what happens is the vehicle will call back to our remote assistance team that can advise the vehicle on what to do. And we have had situations that seem to resemble the situation you're describing, where we advise the vehicle on how to proceed, and then it decides the safe way to follow that situation and navigate it safely. So we are able to advise our vehicle to navigate those. On the note of 2-year-old children, as someone who is a father of 2 toddlers, we do not allow riding in a vehicle if you have children who require a car seat without the car seat. So you have to be riding it with a car seat and attended by an adult. You have to be 18 years or older or accompanied by an adult in order for a minor to ride, if that answers your question.
Is that in the bill, or is that a feature of your company?
I'll defer to the Senator, but that is a requirement for us.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've got a couple of questions. I'm not sure exactly who to address them to, so I'll pose them and let whoever thinks they can answer them best come up. I received an email on Monday, March 3rd from a constituent who's legally blind. And he says the requirement of a licensed driver to operate one of these cars would preclude a blind individual access to that service. So does this bill require that anyone who's going to be in charge, I guess, not operate, because no human being is operating the system, but in charge of a vehicle on the road, is that person required to be a licensed driver?
It is not. So that also, Senator Henson asked that. This does not require that a licensed driver be in there.
Okay. Second question. What about hacking? These things are run by elaborate computers, I'm sure. Are they capable of being hacked so that some person, say, in Russia decides he wants to cause mass havoc in the United States and hacks into all the autonomous vehicles on the road and causes them all to have accidents?
It's a great question. I will say it's something, cybersecurity is a very important issue to the industry. It's not specific to the AV industry. It's something that I think the auto industry in general, and particularly connected cars, are really focused on right now. Specific to AVs, it's something that is built by design throughout the development process of an AV. And the other thing I'll note is that, AVs are designed such that the automated driving system is equipped to drive the vehicle. It does not require wireless communication, for example, in order to drive, on a regular basis. Everything, the suite of sensors and the technology is all kind of encapsulated within the vehicle itself. So I don't know if that assuages some of your concerns with the hacking, but it's not like, it operates on a cell phone line, for example. So I just wanted to put that out there as well.
My wife and I watched a movie last summer. I can't begin to remember the name of it, and we didn't finish watching the movie because it wasn't very good. It was a dystopian movie and about a family living in a house out in a rural area, and something happened, looked like the world was going to come to an end, and they figured we need to get out of here, and they got in the car and drove away, and they got to a traffic accident. And it turned out that nobody ahead of them was in a car with a driver. They'd all sort of crashed into each other. And then they looked behind them, and here comes another autonomous vehicle. And they quickly got out of the way, and it crashed into the car. And there were a whole sequence of additional autonomous vehicles crashing into cars. Could that happen if we put cars on the road, that somehow they'd all get programmed or hacked to crash into each other?
No, they really are designed to operate kind of on their own. It's not, a computer in the back room that's operating them all at once. It really is all within each vehicle is the automated driving system that is responding to road conditions kind of on a case-by-case basis. So it will see things that, we can't see 20 feet in front of us in, a variety of different conditions. And each vehicle is designed to kind of see those and react on a case-by-case basis.
Okay, now let me ask one more question, and this is one which I think is a serious issue. A couple of years ago, I had a bill to deal with automobile windshields. These days, the windshields frequently have cameras and electronics embedded in them. In the old days, if you had a cracked windshield, it would simply take it out and plop a new windshield in, and that was it. You drive off. It would take 15 minutes, and you'd pay the price. My bill 2 or 3 years ago required, if you have a windshield with electronics embedded in it, you'd have to follow national standards to put the new windshield in to make sure that the electronics are working properly, because these cars so frequently rely on, for example, cameras on the side to determine whether or not there's a car in your blind spot. And if it's not working properly, you could turn left to change lanes when there's a car in the blind spot and it would cause an accident. And you would be entirely comfortable making that moving over because you would think that the car was working properly when in fact it wasn't, because the electronics had not been properly calibrated in your car. At the time we did that, they indicated that over time, because the car goes in potholes and things like that, the electronics, the calibration gets out of sync. So this bill permits not just Waymo situations where you all have a fleet and I'm sure you attend to your cars to make sure the electronics haven't gotten out of sync. But if you're the owner of a car, how would you know that the electronics in your car have gotten out of sync so that your autonomous car is no longer going to be driving, excuse me, safely on the road because the electronics aren't going to be working properly.
So I think one point is that this bill is specifically designed for level 4 autonomous vehicles and above, where, again, there would be no driver in the vehicle. It could be a personal ownership model, but right now, a lot of it is fleet. I think in the future, it would happen in a similar way. The vehicle.
I'm sorry, does this bill only apply to fleets?
No, it does not. No.
I didn't think so. So under this vehicle, cars could be sold to me.
Yes.
So I would use them all, I would sit in the back or in the passenger seat while they drove themselves, right? Okay.
Yes.
So I'd renew my question. How would I know that my car's gotten out, that the calibration's no longer working properly?
It would be designed in the same way so that it would have to be able to meet the minimal risk condition, and that is set, within the ADS itself. It will know if a sensor isn't working, and it will not operate. It will kind of, right now, how it looks is it kind of calls for, a remote operator, for example, in the fleet context. The same type of thing will have to happen in the personal ownership context, where, they will alert, whoever it is that the vehicle cannot function as designed because, for example, one of the sensors isn't working or, it's a critical error that will have to be fixed. It's kind of like, today, I have a 2013 car. It's not very automated, but my car tells me, when the tire pressure is low, or it will, it will alert me to that. So I think it would be kind of in that vein.
So you're telling me that somehow the car autocorrects, or at least detects that one or more of the electronic systems are not properly calibrated at the moment, and they would stop the car from operating altogether until the owner of the car got the car recalibrated?
I think it depends a lot on the situation here. I mean, I don't want to answer a question that is, it could be a lot of different situations. I think in the context of like a camera that's not working, if the car can still function, it might not say, we can't function at all. So I think it is a very fact-specific situation. But yes, I think that's the idea behind this, yes.
Okay, and is that covered by the bill? So that the bill would work, so that if the car did not have this self-corrective or self-identification system, the car would literally not operate?
That is what the minimal risk condition means, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. So Senator West, his question leads me to believe that this bill is much broader than what it was. I thought it was about fleet vehicles, or being fully autonomous fleet vehicles being able to do this. This is actually for the sale to the public to use these vehicles as well?
So this is the first step. This creates the legislative framework to allow these.
Right.
We are not anywhere near having those cars on our road. We're just not.
But this is beyond just a company being able to operate. Correct.
This is not just about fleet vehicles, correct?
Okay. Then I have a few more questions. I had some questions just kind of thinking that this was some sort of companies that wanted to do this, so take that in with that in mind. One of the questions that I had was how, and this is for the gentleman from, is it Waymo? You said you're operating this in some other states?
Yes, sir. In San Francisco, Los Angeles, Phoenix, and Austin.
How did you go about determining the communities in which your company was going to serve?
Senator B, we look at the opportunity to serve as many people as possible in these areas, and part of this comes down to geography. Part of this comes down to regulatory environment, which of course is very important. And then we engage with communities before we launch any service, before we begin testing.
One thing that I as a black man, you have some communities that me trying to get a taxi cab is going to be somewhat difficult.
Yes, sir.
There's some communities that Uber drivers and others, they don't want to go into. That's sort of the point of my question. So does your company service all communities?
Senator, we serve broad geographic areas in San Francisco, Los Angeles, and Austin, and then, of course, Phoenix as well. Equity is a key consideration for us. We've actually partnered with the National Urban League on ensuring that we are conducting our operations with the lens towards equity, and that has been a core focus of ours. In fact, last year, we had a pilot with the Los Angeles chapter of the Urban League to provide rides to people in Los Angeles who had challenges accessing mobility. So we are sensitive to the challenges that people face with accessing mobility. And personally, I actually used to be a rideshare driver in Washington, D.C. Did that for 10 years ago and for full time. And I always made sure to do pickups and drop-offs wherever I was requested, just for the record there.
No, I mean, I could foresee something like this being able to be used to deal with issues of discrimination and people not feeling safe going, for whatever reason in their minds, not feeling safe going into certain communities because they feel that their lives might be endangered. But if there's no one in the vehicle.
Yes, sir, that's a big advantage, right, is avoiding that. Okay.
Before I let you sit down, I want to make sure. So in those communities, how does this service work in conjunction with the services that actually have human drivers? I mean, is there some harmony there? Are we putting those companies out of business that have human drivers?
Thank you for the question, Senator. In Phoenix, we've been working with Uber for a few years on actually offering autonomous rides through the Uber app. So whenever there aren't enough drivers available, it can help to boost the amount of rides or cars available to passengers. In addition, in Atlanta and in Austin, we just announced our launch in Austin yesterday. We are actually exclusively on the Uber app in both of those cities. So when people request an UberX or other rides, you may get an autonomous vehicle through Waymo, or you may get a human-driven vehicle, but consumers will be given the choice between those.
Got you. Thank you.
Certainly.
And I'm sorry, I didn't get your name.
Greg Rogers. Mike.
No, the ladies.
Arlen.
I got a question for you. You had mentioned something about a level 4 above, and what is that?
Yeah, absolutely. So there are essentially 6 levels of automation according to Society of Automotive Engineers standard. It's a widely used industry standard essentially. And level 0 to 2 automation is what we call driver assistance technology. So many of our cars today might have this technology built in. It's lane keeping assist, automatic emergency braking, that sort of thing. Level 3 and above, and particularly level 4 and above, that's what we call an autonomous vehicle. And that's where with level 4 and 5, there is no requirement for a human to be in the vehicle within its operational design domain, the parameters under which it's designed to operate. And so that's really what we're focused on here because there would be no human in the vehicle.
Just out of curiosity, are these vehicles able to detect potholes?
Yes. Yes.
Do they have a reporting kind of system so that...
To go around it?
Oh, no, if you hit it, I'm just curious if local governments are then able to be, if they're reported to that they're potholes.
Oh, that's interesting. Do you have a sense from your perspective?
It's on a case-by-case basis.
Yeah, I would, that's what makes sense to me. It's on a case-by-case basis here. I mean, I think it kind of depends on, how it would work in human-driven vehicles as well.
Thank you. And I think I have a couple questions for the sponsor. And this is the bill language. So on page 4, lines 10 through 11, it says a human driver may operate a fully autonomous vehicle if the automated driving system is not engaged. And now the word may caught my attention, and I'm wondering why may and not must?
Let's see.
So if the driving system isn't engaged, shouldn't they have a human driver? I guess is the question.
Yeah. Trying to think of. I'm going to have to look into that and figure
That's
out.
fair.
Yeah. Thank you.
And the next question, going to page 3, and again, I was, when the bill was presented, I'm thinking companies doing this, not necessarily along with what Chris has shared.
Because that's where we are right now, so that makes sense, yeah.
Right. So on page 3, lines 13 through 18, it talks, well, B1 says, before operating a fully autonomous vehicle on a highway in the state without a human driver and with the automated driving system engaged, a person shall submit a law enforcement interaction plan to the administration. When I was thinking that this was just some company, that company is the person that would submit this law enforcement interaction plan to the administration. If it's individuals, that person who purchased the car is going to be responsible for submitting a law enforcement interaction plan to the administration. So then my question is, one, what is a law enforcement interaction plan? That's number one. And two, how does the person know which law enforcement agency they're supposed to submit this plan to with so many police departments across the state?
That is a great question. I think you're right that most of the language was drafted with where we are right now, which is companies. So that may need some tweaking as time goes on if we get to the point where, you know, these are actually coming to the road for humans. Did you want to address the other piece?
Yeah, so.
No, can you come up to the podium, please? Thank you.
So for the first responder plan, I think we have an amendment to change it to first responder rather than just law enforcement. MVA is currently serving that function for the testing permits, so we have a number of companies that have tested with us. We do require a first responder plan, so that's something that they provide to us. We have a subcommittee of our Connected Autonomous Vehicle Working Group that is the first responder subcommittee. And we do share that information with that first responder subcommittee. As we say, not just law enforcement, but firefighters also need an EMS if they come across one of these vehicles. So we currently serve that function of coordinating that.
MVA does?
Yeah, MVA does already with the permit process that we have. So this would be just an extension of that. So
So if I
companies
got one of these vehicles, I would submit the law enforcement plan to you all?
Yeah, I think in regulation, we'll have to flesh out some of that. If it does extend to where individuals are buying level 4 and level 5, we would have to, we have some amendments that require, before you put it on the road, it has to also be authorized by the MVA. They'd have to meet all the regulatory standards set forth by the administration. It's one of the amendments that we have that would require whoever puts these on the road to meet also MVA regulatory requirements. And one of those requirements would be a first responder plan submitted to the MVA and approved in operational design domain. But yeah, we haven't really contemplated about how that would be for an individual. If an individual were to purchase one of these, we would have to think through that in regulation, how they would submit it, what the mechanism would be, and what the approval process would be for that.
And I find it interesting that where we are moving in society that, I mean, legally the term person incorporates a lot more than a person. So now we have to get down and actually distinguish between a person, an individual.
That's right.
A human drive. It's
That's right. That's right. Person means Waymo, right?
Right. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't know who wants to answer these. I'm going to apologize. I was out in the back for a few minutes. I had to.
We covered it all.
You already covered it all? Well, I see you're very surprised that my mic was lit up, Senator. So I guess whoever, maybe you or someone that can help you? I guess what I want to ask is, and maybe this was brought up, and again, I'm going to apologize, but what or who in the industry has the best autonomous technology right now that's being utilized? Like I heard them say out in California, they're using this. Like, is there a manufacturer of a vehicle, or is there a certain type of vehicle that's better, or is there a certain technology that's within these vehicles that's better? This is what I'm trying to answer, and you'll. What's that? Did someone ask that already?
No, Mr. Rogers, my colleague here, is with Waymo, but I'm here with the Autonomous Vehicle Industry Association, so we represent a number of different companies.
Okay.
They all, meet these requirements, so.
They all meet a minimum requirement, but so in vehicle manufacturing, there's different stiffness coefficients for, say, like steel that's used in vehicles, and some manufacturers' requirements in the United States industry of automakers is different than that's what's maybe used overseas. They all have to meet the same minimum, but some of them go over and above that. Can we agree on that idea?
I think that there are different ways that AVs are designed, and it does depend on the use case as well, right? But
Right.
I can't speak to specific company practices, so I think all of the companies, though, that we represent, they have to meet, they are subject to a number of different standards, federal safety standards, they have to comply with traffic laws, and of course, industry standards as well.
Okay, so I'll just ask, does Tesla have a good full self-driving autonomous capability?
We don't represent Tesla, I will say.
I'm just asking about the technology.
I will say that our association represents the kind of level 4 autonomous vehicles, and so we don't represent companies that do more of the level 2 kind of driver assistance technology.
Okay, so speaking of that, does Maryland even allow level 2 operation right now?
So the way it works is, in general, it's not required to get some sort of authorization for level 2 because there's a requirement for a human to be behind the vehicle. So
Sure.
That's typically operated today.
So, okay, then my wife has a Tesla. I don't tell a lot of people this, but my wife has a Tesla because she's still, she's upset with me because I've supported the idea of doubling their registration fees because I told her she's getting over too long. Time to pay up. But her vehicle can do full self-driving, but it's not permitted in the state of Maryland to allow it. Even though she's sitting there, you can't allow the vehicle to drive for yourself. It's not permitted yet in this state. Is that correct?
I don't know that, to be honest. We don't represent Tesla, so I'd have to.
I'm going to ask. I'll ask the person from SHA or MVA. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's a tough question if whether or not it's permitted. I guess being from the law enforcement side, supposedly you could, in theory, you could write, a law enforcement officer could write a ticket for somebody right now, failure to pay full-time and attention.
Failure to provide full-time and attention, right?
Yeah, something along those lines.
Because Maryland doesn't permit it.
There's no express exemption in the statute. So it really doesn't contemplate, the statute contemplates that there's a driver behind the wheel. And so all those laws are written like.
But the driver's behind the wheel and in control of the vehicle, responsible for the operation of the vehicle.
That's right. So we have been issuing permits to people under testing exception where we partner with law enforcement and law enforcement in that particular area. So we have one in National Harbor. We talked to Prince George's County and their law enforcement. We kind of agree we're going to issue a permit to this vehicle.
So I guess that's kind of like my question is, why are we looking to go to a 4 or 5 when we haven't even determined if a 1 through 3 is approvable in this state? And here's why I bring this up. For example, if I'm driving and I decide I want to, or if my wife is driving her car, hypothetically, and she decided she wanted to go into full self-driving mode, and she sets it that way that it'll do the lane assist and all that, when you come certain areas that are cause of confusion to the autonomous vehicles, like exit ramps where there's no longer a shoulder line. So it sees the center line, but it sees the widening. So all of a sudden the car wants to adjust to the center of the lanes that it recognizes. And and Tesla and other autonomous vehicle manufacturers have had issues where they have then hit those barriers that are at the gore or at the wedge of exit ramps. Are you familiar with any of those issues?
Yeah, and certainly if it did cross a line, she would be subject to the citation, right?
Yeah, but my point is that in that circumstance, the driver is able to recognize that the autonomous vehicle is in error and take over control of the vehicle. That would be level 2 or whatever you were saying, 2 or 3, right? In a fully autonomous vehicle, there's no one there to make that correction.
I can speak to this quickly here. And then, do you want, yeah. So it's essentially different technology. The idea is to eliminate human error, and human error is what causes the 40,000 crashes every year on our roads. So we really are trying to design an entirely different technology here, built on a different, stack, different sensors, different kind of computing, and so it really is different. And driver assistance features can be helpful, but we're really trying to chart a different path forward.
When I'm looking at some of the, I'm sorry, go ahead. Did you have something to add?
Well, I'm happy to speak to Waymo's safety record if that's helpful.
I just wanted to say, when I was looking at some of the statistics that were provided, and it was talking about while the autonomous vehicle industry has improved with its standards and its abilities, there's a time, and it's, I guess, 2023-ish, that it was like almost 10%, like they had a collision rate that was actually higher than, I'll have to look it up, but I apologize.
Well, Senator, if I could just
recognize. Go ahead. Go ahead and answer.
If I could just say, Senator, from Waymo's perspective, the data to date indicates that the Waymo driver is significantly safer on the roads where we operate. We have already driven over 33 million miles driverless, and we've already seen significantly fewer serious collisions, and that comes out to, through looking at insurance data, 88% fewer property damage claims and 92% reduction in bodily injury claims compared to human drivers in the places where we operate.
Of those incidents of conflict, those crashes, what was the percentage? Like, you're saying that this system is supposed to be alleviating human error. Of those, what was the fault finding of those percentage of those crashes? Were the autonomous vehicle at fault?
Every situation is different. There's a lot of rear ending that happens because of inattentive drivers. I
know, but I'm just asking, like, what are the numbers? You just told me all the numbers about how many miles driven and all this and the number of crashes, but you didn't say of those, what percentage of those is the autonomous vehicle at fault?
Well, thank you, Senator. To more directly answer you, we do report to the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration all of our crashes as required by law. And we make that data publicly available at waymo.com/safety. You can actually download the spreadsheets and see each of those.
Listen, man, I appreciate it. I'm not trying to belabor this. I just asked you a question. If you don't have the data, you don't have the data.
I don't have it all in front of me.
Can you get it to me?
It'll take a minute to walk through, but I would be happy to share it with you.
So if you can get that to me, that would be awesome. And then my last thing is if it is there's no one, if the autonomous vehicle is at fault, who's being issued the citation for any traffic citation or negligence, if you will, for involving a fatality, if it's a pedestrian struck or something to that effect?
Yeah. In the event that there is a requirement for a citation, we do pay all citations as required by law. And in the case of liability for a crash, we accept liability for any crash when there's regardless of whether it's a passenger in the vehicle or not. We accept liability for when there's an at-fault crash involving us.
You mean an at-fault crash involving?
Sorry. Yeah. But
so, okay, that's the concept that I have.
He's not going to contest any accident at all.
Yeah, you're not contesting any crashes that you're involved in?
No, I'm sorry, I must have misspoke. What I'm saying is that when it comes, I'm sorry, can we follow up offline on this?
No, I'd rather talk now. Because this is an important point to this whole technology, is you're trying to put a vehicle, 3,500-pound projectile on a roadway without driver intervention, without anyone overseeing it except the autonomous vehicle. That's my point, is there are going to be times where there is a conflict or an error on the part of your Waymo system or whatever it is, and what is that? Where does that distinctly lie? Because you don't have, normally in a vehicle collision, you got a driver who's at fault, and you got liability associated with that through your insurance. This one, you're saying that there's insurance, I guess, or you guys pay the citations or whatever, but the strict liability, or there's, I don't want to see an opportunity for a carve-out to say, well, I own the vehicle, but it's the technology's fault. wasn't our fault. We weren't driving the car. We just bought what we thought was safe.
Sure, yeah, we've thought through a lot of this stuff as we're going to have to as this technology is coming, but the way this bill works, we have an amendment that would give MVA a kill switch, that would essentially, so there's nobody driving the car. It could be in a crash and there's nobody inside the car at all. Who do you cite? You can't cite anybody criminally for that, right? There's no...
Right, and that's my point. If you kill somebody.
So civil citations, speed cameras and stuff, they'll pay, or running red lights, they'll pay the civil citation. We can hold them accountable for that. The mechanism that we have at the MVA under an amendment would be, we would essentially decertify the ability for that company to operate, and that's the way it has worked in certain places where there have been some crashes. And so if we got information, the way the amendment works is and we don't have the amendment in front of us, I know, but the way we've posed the amendment is if we got information that a vehicle is unsafe at the MVA, we would then basically have a back and forth with the company and quickly decertify that company, suspend their registration so they couldn't operate. But yeah, their criminal citation, as far as a criminal citation goes, there's nobody to cite. You can't criminally cite.
And then is there is there a sensor on the back of it if it's trying to be pulled over by a police officer? Like that recognizes the lights? It does? Okay. And so, look, that's where I'm at. You know what my answers are and the information I need from you. I just have some concerns why, and I guess, Phil, this would be more for in your line of thinking or responsibility is why wouldn't we look to approve a level, either like a 2 or 3 or whatever that is on that scale of 1 to 5 to see how that works out before we just jump over the, everything and do fully autonomous.
Certainly. Thank you, Senator. I'll follow up. Sorry for the confusion.
Thank you.
Senator James.
Thank you, and my hat's off to my colleague. He asked a lot of the questions I was interested in. And I was out of the room briefly, too. So just quickly, I just want to make sure, under this bill, you could have absolutely no human being in the car. That's envisioned under the bill. All right. Where did the language for this bill come from?
So this is substantially similar to language that has been enacted in 25 other states. And by substantially similar, I mean...
Where did that language come from? Who drafted that language?
I don't know if it's an AVIA or, I think it's a model language that...
It's something that's been worked through over many years now.
Yes. Yes, so who drafted the language?
I would say Autonomous Vehicle Industry Association in coordination with many others, yes.
Well, I'd kind of like to know who drafted the language ultimately. I'd like to know if there were engineers involved, lawyers, people in the insurance business, risk business, and then I'd like to see a document that sort of describes why you came upon this language, why you chose these words, because some of them are very unique, different, and out of the box, and don't square with what I know about the law, liability, and other issues that I don't want to make this hearing much longer. So I'd really like to see a deep dive into how this language was drafted, who was involved, and rather than ask you a lot of speculative questions, which I'm sure you're going to defer and say, I don't know. Yeah, so we'll go there.
We'll get that for you.
But it does seem to me, with no criticism to their sponsor, who I very much like, that this bill doesn't seem like it's ready for prime time. First it comes in very late and is drafted with the as if you were talking about companies, and not individuals. There are a lot of questions that my colleague just asked that couldn't be answered, but the biggest thing I sort of have trouble with is the fact that this bill anticipates that an autonomous vehicle could fail to be able to negotiate a particular operation, and that's language right in the bill, and yet the bill also anticipates that these cars could be operated with absolutely no human in the car to override that. So that seems like such an inconsistency if you want to address the fact that both those things are happening in this bill.
So a couple of things. This bill actually went into drafting in November. We didn't get it until right before the drop deadline.
Oh,
so
I'm
it was
you
mentioned that it came in late, and I'm just explaining that's why. And it's broad because it's laying the foundation, and we are not yet at the point of me buying a fully autonomous vehicle. We're at the point of the companies, and so that's where a lot of that language is. But it does recognize to what Senator Sidner asked about, it can address the level 4 when there is a human that overrides the autonomous. So there is that language in there. So I just wanted to put that part out there.
Right. Yeah. I'm wondering why the approach wasn't more to have the industry work with the state, because I see the states being, they're trying to be very restrained here, but they're indicating that MVA is sort of being pushed off to the side, and I don't want to regurgitate
Senator,
what they're
I need to push back on that. They're not. They have been in since the beginning. The reason these amendments are coming late is because we put it in November, and we've been talking to them ever since the interim. But because we didn't get the language until right before the drop deadline, we couldn't incorporate these. I mean, we intended to have all of this stuff done. That's why I put the request in November. But MVA has been at the center, as has the Insurance Administration, as has law enforcement. As I mentioned, MVA has been chairing the CAV since 2015. So while we may be fumbling some of the questions right now, these are actually all answerable, and we can answer them. The question of law enforcement, Senator Folden, this has been happening in many other states. We can get you that answer, absolutely, and I apologize that we don't have it for you right now. That is our bad. I own that, but we can get that. Yep.
Because I like to get my questions done. I want everybody to be here till midnight. I hear you, and I guess what I'm saying is I see MVA, at least in their, and MDOT in this testimony. I'm not questioning whether they've been in the room or even working on permits, which I do think. But they're, the comment that we will need to give, this legislature will need to give sufficient authority to MVA to ensure. So
Those are
if
the
they were in the
amendments.
room, why isn't that already in the bill?
Those are the amendments. They're just noting that in their testimony.
And then just on liability, I'm very confused. We've decided, I don't understand how liability works here. If an autonomous vehicle and there's no human involved, crashes into a human, hurts them badly, who's liable?
I can speak to this. I appreciate the question, and I can certainly appreciate the sentiment behind it. I think the reality is our liability system has been able to adapt to new technologies for many decades now, and we've seen this, even in the driver assistance context. So I mentioned, probably many of us have driver assistance features in the room. I personally, again, I have a 2013 car. It doesn't have a lot of bells and whistles with it. But, a couple years ago, I was driving down the highway and my car stopped. The engine shut off. It turned out it was a crazy fluke with the system. It thought my car was on fire and it wasn't. Luckily, I wasn't in an accident, but if I had been, that is something that would have to be really figured out in the discovery process. And so the idea here is we just don't want to predetermine liability because, there can be so many different factors in any given incident. And so it would be applied the same way as it would for, any car on the road today, where, it could be a tire, it could be the software, it could be the hardware. We don't have enough information right now to be able to tell you with any given incident.
Well, right now, the way an accident will work, if I'm in a car and I make a mistake, I'm liable. Now, can I turn around and sue somebody that made a part in my car? Yeah. But the person I just killed or maimed isn't waiting for that. So that's what I'm trying to figure out. That seems to me you're suggesting that we go a whole different route the way the bill is drafted now.
I think it would be exactly the same as it is with current vehicles. So the question of who is at fault is a very fact-dependent, situation.
Sounds like we might be able.
Sorry, I just I said the vehicle, the autonomous vehicle caused the crash. Who is liable?
Sorry, you're asking like if it caused a crash? Then again, the company, if it's determined at that point that the AV caused a crash, again, through discovery, through all the normal litigation procedures, then again, that company is liable.
The premise is they have caused the crash.
Yep. Okay. Yep.
Thank you.
So who is liable?
Yeah. Sorry, I thought I said the company is liable in that scenario.
I'll follow.
Great. Senator West.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm sorry to come back for a second, but Senator Folden's questions all of a sudden triggered another question in my mind. So for the fellow from Waymo and the people advocating for the bill, the lady advocating for the bill, Let me give you a hypothetical. First of all, I'm assuming that the cars are programmed to drive at speed limit, not above the speed limit. So in my experience driving on the Beltway and lots of other roads, very few cars are driving at the speed limit. Most cars are driving a little faster, whether it's 2 miles, 5 miles, 7 miles. In Maryland, you can drive up to 12 miles faster, and if a camera catches you, you don't get a ticket. So it's Senator Lewis shaking. What's it, 11?
11 at 12 you get
Yeah, 12 you get a ticket. You guys say up to 12. Up to 12. If you're going a smidge under 12, you don't get a ticket. And most cars on the road are driving faster. So let's assume that someone is in a Waymo car and doesn't like to be the slowest car on the road, being passed by everybody on the road, and wants to fiddle with the system in order to make this car drive faster. Does your system allow the person to fiddle with the system to make the car go faster than the speed limit?
No, Senator. Safety is our priority, and the Waymo driver is programmed to follow all traffic laws and speed limits.
Thank you. I figured you were going to say that. Now, what about the car that an individual would own? Would there be any way, given the manufacture of these autonomous vehicles, that if I bought a car and owned the car, that I could override the system in my car to tell the car, just drive consistently 7 miles an hour faster than the speed limit?
I can't speak to the hypothetical on that myself, but perhaps someone else might be able to.
Yeah, I mean, I think, to be honest, it's a hypothetical that isn't here yet, so I hate to not give a direct response to the question, but I don't think that we envision it being a human being able to override it. AVs are programmed to follow the speed limits. They have to under this law, and that's the whole point of it.
And finally, for the representative of the Maryland Motor Vehicle Administration, would you approve, I can't remember what these things are called, these, the law enforcement interaction plan? Would you approve an interaction plan in which an owner of an autonomous vehicle might be able to override the vehicle and to program the vehicle to drive consistently 7 miles an hour over the speed limit?
Yeah, that generally would be part of the law enforcement interaction plan, I think, but I can't speak to whether or not we would. Again, it's a hypothetical, but we would have the authority to potentially say, with the operational design domain submission or the first responder interaction plan, we would have some kind of authority to either push back and say, no, we're not going to approve that because it allows for configuration that would enable this vehicle to break the law, or
might I suggest that this would not be quite so hypothetical if these cars start to be sold to individuals and they get a reputation for being the slowest car on the road. I would think that this hypothetical is going to become real pretty quickly. Thanks.
Let's hear from Senator McKay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So 2 things. I believe I saw on Tickety Talk a video that somebody was stuck in a car. So my question is, will there be some form of a kill switch or something for the safety? If you want to answer that question or not. I know that wasn't your product.
Thanks for the question, Senator. As far as Waymo Driver goes, when passengers are in the vehicle, there's a button on the screen that allows you to say pull over. Okay. And if you click that button, the vehicle will pull over for you.
Yeah, and I just want to also be clear, the good senator from Frederick gets a little confusing. You're Waymo, correct?
Yeah.
And then you create these type of companies? You're not Whammo? And you never did the Frisbee?
We are not the Frisbee people, sir, but I do appreciate a good Frisbee.
Be clear. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you, Senator.
Well, it sounds like a demonstration at some point may be in order. I was in Austin and saw these cars on the road, and they're very impressive, and you run them for 6 months empty. Because I tried to hail a Waymo, but I could not because they're running empty before you allow passengers in it. So that was pretty cool. We're going to go to our next panel here. And tell me if you've already testified. William Kress, Joshua Fisher, Ruth Whitaker, and then everyone else is virtual.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. My name is Bill Kress. I'm here today on behalf of the Alliance for Automotive Innovation. The Alliance is a trade association representing car manufacturers and other technology companies, including autonomous vehicle companies. We are in full support of this legislation. Look, we've had some hearings on these topics over the years. Lots of questions, lots of good questions, liability, criminal citation, how do they operate? All those can be answered. They've been answered in 25 other states. I personally had the opportunity to use a Waymo out in Phoenix. I took it from the hotel to the airport. I survived. It was a great experience. It was $11 as opposed to Uber's fee that was close to $30. The biggest advantage of autonomous vehicles is it's going to be much safer. We're going to save lives. But you'll see behind me, you'll see the disability community. You'll see that they need this. This is important to them. This is much better than public transportations, which they often have issues getting on buses for various reasons, hailing cabs for various reasons. I'm sure you'll hear from them. But what I would say is the MVA has been a great partner on this issue. They've had a work group since 2015. We've been part of that. I think this bill is a good framework. It's a good starting point. The MVA will work out in regulations many of the questions that you've raised today. So this may take a little bit of work. We may have to have some broader discussions. I know the sponsor has amendments, but I have full confidence in the MVA being able to handle these issues. It's been handled in many other states, and we can move forward. There's only a handful of companies using this technology right now at any scale, but that can change rapidly. I expect it to change rapidly in the coming years with the advent of AI and the acceleration of that technology. So with that, I would support the bill and ask for a favorable report and ask the committee to work through the issues, perhaps in a work group, to work through the amendments. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. My name is Ruth Whitaker, and I'm the Director of Civic Innovation Policy at Chamber of Progress, a tech industry coalition that works to ensure that everyone benefits from technological leaps. Our partners do include AV companies, including Aurora, Waymo, and Zoox, but our partners don't have a vote or veto over our positions. I'm here today to support SB 949, which would establish a framework for the deployment of autonomous vehicles in Maryland. These vehicles have the potential to save thousands of lives and expand mobility for thousands of people across the state. They also have the potential to create hundreds of thousands of high-paying jobs and connect people to millions of others. Finally, AVs will reduce roadway emissions and help Maryland reach its goals of net zero emissions by 2045 for the deployment of autonomous vehicles in Maryland. These vehicles have the potential. By creating a pathway for the deployment of autonomous vehicles, this bill will unlock these benefits for Maryland residents. I know the safety benefits have already been covered, and I'm sure that other panelists are going to cover the accessibility benefits as well. So I'd just like to highlight some of the economic benefits that AVs will bring. Our research found that nationwide, replacing 13% of vehicles on the road with AVs over the next 15 years could create 455,000 jobs. Those jobs would be high-paying and accessible without a college degree, with 59% of workers without a degree earning more than the U.S. median wage. AVs can also help supplement when labor gaps exist. Across the country, the trucking industry has experienced extreme turnover and widespread job vacancies, resulting in significant delays to shipments and rising prices for basic necessities. Autonomous trucks can mitigate these costs by filling driver vacancies, bringing down the cost of shipping and consumer goods. Finally, because AVs are typically electric and are programmed to follow traffic rules and speed limits, they ultimately use less energy. Deploying autonomous vehicles can help Maryland reach its emissions reduction goals by 2045. In sum, AVs present tremendous opportunities, and we encourage a favorable report on SB 949. Thank you.
All right, we'll turn to our panelists joining us virtually, and then we'll open up for questions. So let's go to let's go to Robert Melvin.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, my name is Robert Melvin. I'm the Northeast Region Director at the R Street Institute, a public policy research organization that's focused on promoting free markets and limited effective government. We support this measure, which establishes a regulatory framework for autonomous vehicles in Maryland. Senate Bill 949 would allow AVs to operate without a human driver if they meet federal standards and state traffic laws. It also sets legal responsibilities and mandates law enforcement interaction plans. This bill positions Maryland to lead the AV industry while addressing key challenges like rising fatal crashes, which increased from 493 to 573 over the past 4 years. Human errors like distracted driving and impaired driving contribute heavily to this issue, as does traffic congestion, which Maryland is ranked 50th nationally for and is costing Maryland drivers between $1,371 and $2,465 annually. This measure will expand consumer choice, save money, and improve safety. Studies show that AVs reduce fuel usage by up to 42%, eliminate stop-and-go traffic, and are far safer than human drivers, with 88% fewer property damage claims and 92% fewer injury claims. They also have 62% fewer police report crashes and 78% fewer reported or fewer injury-causing crashes compared to human drivers. Most often, it turns out that human drivers are the primary culprit in the limited instances of crashes involving AVs. Economically, this could help create jobs in the state and also help the state could benefit from the additional investment that could bring. AV technology isn't experimental. It's already been deployed in many states, and Maryland authorizes its testing. This would just make Maryland the 26th state to support AV deployment. For these reasons, we urge a favorable report on the bill. And also, my written testimony includes a lot of footnotes that answer some of the questions that were asked earlier. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Melvin. We'll now go on to Margaret Durkin.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. My name is Margaret Durkin, and I'm the Mid-Atlantic Executive Director for TechNet, a tech trade association. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to speak today in favor of Senate Bill 949 related to autonomous vehicles. AVs have tremendous benefits, as you've heard from previous speakers. They increase access to transportation and create mobility as a service. We believe that Senate Bill 949 is a great option for Maryland, as it'll align with the 25 other states who have passed enabling AV legislation. This bill is business-friendly and tech-neutral, and please see my written remarks for further comments, and thank you to the sponsor for their work on this issue. Happy to take any questions.
Excellent. Thank you very much. All right. Let's hear from Michael Hammond.
Thank you, Chairman and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Mike Hammond. I'm Head of Safety and Compliance at Volvo Autonomous Solutions. Prior to joining VS, I spent 30 years in the full truckload transportation industry and operations, 6 states and Quebec and Ontario. Volvo Autonomous Solutions is a strong support of SB 949. We'd like to thank Senator Love for sponsoring this legislation. Volvo Autonomous Solutions is a member of the Volvo Group. Our nearly 400 employees are mission-driven to transform the movement of goods through efficient, sustainable, and safe autonomous solutions. The autonomous transport solution offered by VS includes a vehicle purpose-built for autonomous driving, a virtual driver, operations and uptime support, as well as a cloud solution that manages logistics flows. Solutions developed by VAS are tailor-made for customer needs, and the solutions are intended to make our customers safer, more productive, and sustainable. The Volvo built redundant autonomous vehicles, the backbone of the autonomous transport solution. Volvo is leading the commercial autonomous vehicle space by developing the Volvo VNL Autonomous. The Volvo VNL Autonomous is a truck built for autonomy. It features 6 critical redundant systems: dual braking, steering, communication, computing, power, energy storage, and motion control, enabling safe operations. Volvo is currently testing the Volvo VNL Autonomous in Texas on a lane from Dallas to Houston. And the way forward's working together. Presently, there's no fully autonomous vehicles on Maryland roadways, and current testing in Maryland takes place on designated sites owned by the Maryland DOT and its partners. For AV testing on state roads to occur, Maryland must pass legislation authorizing testing on state roadways, and SB 989 offers a legal path to operating autonomously in Maryland. It provides a state with visibility and a company seeking to operate autonomously in the state, and an opportunity to engage industry to establish the right guardrails to foster innovation without compromising safety. Thanks for this opportunity to voice our support of this legislation.
Excellent. Thank you very much. All right, we'll now hear from Jesse Shirek.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Jesse Shirek. I'm a government affairs specialist with the National Federation of the Blind, our nation's transformative membership organization of blind Americans. Autonomous vehicles are very important to the blind community for a number of reasons listed below. But one thing we support SB 949, and one reason it could really have a positive impact on autonomous vehicles for the blind community throughout the nation is because we have our Center of Excellence in Non-Visual Access here at the National Federation of the Blind, where we have a team of staff members who test a wide range of existing commercial technologies, including autonomous vehicles. Currently, for us to be able to test autonomous vehicles for accessibility, we have to travel out to California or Arizona. And, you know, so we just don't have as much hands-on experience as we could have if they were being tested right here in Maryland. From a personal perspective, I'm a blind person. My spouse, Sherry, is blind and uses a service animal. And when we use existing rideshare like Uber or Lyft, we experience a great deal of discrimination from rideshare drivers. They'll pull up, see her service dog, and refuse us a ride. It doesn't matter if we're going to a medical appointment, to work, or even, you know, on a trip across the country to the airport. So we really think the major advantage in autonomous vehicles is the fact that there is no driver present to discriminate against people who are blind using service dogs or who have any other number of disabilities. So we really encourage you to give a favorable to this particular bill. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much. All right. Questions from the committee. Senator Sidnor.
Thank you. Mr. Kress, in your testimony earlier, if I was hearing you correctly, you seemed to suggest that the General Assembly put together the framework and then kind of rely on the executive branch to flesh it all out. Was I hearing you correctly?
I think many of the issues could be addressed through regulations. I think some of the states have approached it in that manner. And I think the NBA has the expertise. They've been dealing with this issue since 2015.
So then the question that I would have is, given the casting away of the Chevron doctrine, why should we rely on the executive rather than putting it into statute and us doing this?
It is certainly your prerogative to put it in the statute. I'm just talking about the finer points and details.
Gotcha. Thank you. And I'm sorry, ma'am, I didn't get your name. Thank you. But you had talked, you spoke about this legislation as essentially being a job creator. And I guess I'm wondering, on the opposite side, again, if you have Uber and Lyft and these other companies beginning to adopt this technology, I'm looking at it as maybe a job deductor. Would you mind speaking to that concern?
Absolutely. So as I mentioned, our organization commissioned some research into sort of the types of jobs that are going to be created with the deployment of EVs. And what we found is that over 15 years, 455,000 jobs could be created. And that is both on the back end in terms of the production of the vehicles, as well as the sort of continuous operations and maintenance.
So you're talking about job creation in general, not necessarily jobs created here in Maryland.
That's correct. That's a nationwide number, but Maryland in particular is well positioned to take a lot of these jobs because of the strength of particularly the research institutions here and the sort of potential for particularly technicians and software developers in Maryland. And I would also say that the threshold of time that we looked at in this report is 15 years, which is quite long, and we did that on purpose, in part because AV technology is still developing. As has been mentioned, it's still in sort of a nascent stage. It hasn't deployed everywhere. It's not going to be deployed overnight in Maryland. And so if there is a job transition, it's going to be extremely gradual. And what we've seen is that a lot of AV companies have already started creating job training programs in conjunction with community colleges. For example, in Texas, there's a new technician training program so that people, if there is sort of a job transition, that they can take on the new skills to be part of the new jobs in the new economy in the future. But that transition is going to be quite slow.
So it's not necessarily jobs where you're creating the cars, but you're actually talking about the servicing of the vehicles.
Correct. Yeah, the upkeep that's necessary to maintain a fleet. Yep.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Further questions? I had a question. It was maybe Mr. Kress or the for prior panel. I should have asked it then, but it's about like data privacy and like telematics. So you can get these through. It's basically going to be operating through a platform like Uber, right? When you call it, is that right? Like, okay. So what do you and then telematic information? Like, do you all sell that to anyone else? Like, is there a lot of these companies sell that data, like where people are, the telematics, like what the temperature is, how fast the car is going, where do they go? No? Okay.
I have those amendments.
You do have those amendments. Awesome. Okay, great. I'm good. Yeah. I was like, data privacy. All right. Okay. Awesome. All right. All right. Well, thank you all very much then. That's great.
Thank you.
All right, then we need to hear virtually, is Ronza Othman still here?
I'm here.
Hey.
Hey, how are you?
Hey.
Okay.
Good to be with you. All right, you're up next. Go ahead.
All right, great. Thank you so much. Mr. Chair, great to see you. Mr. Vice Chair, members of the committee, I'm sorry I'm not with you in person. My name is Ronza Othman for the record, and I am the president of the National Federation of the Blind of Maryland, which is the Maryland chapter of the National Federation of the Blind. NFB of Maryland is the state's oldest and largest organization of and for blind, low vision, and deafblind individuals. Our members are not able to get driver's license, so we depend on public transportation and other means to move about our communities. The transportation options that exist are insufficient, inefficient, and costly. Independent travel for an individual with a disability is filled with indignities. Throw in the discrimination we experience because of our guide dogs and simply being blind, and it is intolerable. But the advent of the Category 4 and 5 AVs is a true game changer for people with disabilities. I don't have a guide dog, but I tend to experience at least a handful of rideshare denials every week. When the driver pulls up and sees that I'm blind, or when I text them to ask that they honk their horn when they arrive so I know that they're there for me. Last month, I traveled for the first time in a different state using an autonomous vehicle. I independently ordered the vehicle. It came to get me. I got into it. It took me where I wanted to go. And then I did what I needed to do, and then I called it, and it took me home. I even was able to make it sing a jingle for me so that I know that it was my particular vehicle. It did not discriminate against me because I was blind. It probably had no idea, and it definitely didn't care that I was blind. People claim that these are unsafe or that they get lost in airport parking lots, but I've had human drivers that are unsafe, under the influence, sleepy, texting, distracted, etc. This is not an issue for an autonomous vehicle, and I've certainly had plenty of drivers get lost in an airport parking lot, but at least the AV is being monitored, and so it can be guided out, or I can call for help to get out. AV is a game changer for people with disabilities, and I urge a favorable report to SB 949. I'm happy to answer any questions. I've had a fabulous experience using this, and I'd love to answer questions about that experience if you have any. Thank you so much.
All right. Ronza, good to be with you, as always. Questions from the committee? All right, no one took the bait, all right?
Oh, sad.
All right.
Thanks so much.
Thanks. Thank you. All right, is Franz Schneiderman, Mr. Schneiderman, you're up.
Thank you, Chairman Smith, members of the committee. I'm Franz Schneiderman, Consumer Auto Maryland. I work for safety and fairness for Maryland drivers and Maryland consumers, and I'm a road safety advocate. First, I want to thank Senator Love for her concern about consumer safety and road safety. I've worked with her on bills, and I appreciate her concerns. And I appreciate the way she characterized the bill today, which is different from the way I've heard the bill characterized in the House hearing and some other places, as the beginning of a regulatory process, which I think is what we need here, is the beginning of a regulatory process. My concern is that if you read the text of the bill itself, and I haven't gotten to review these amendments, it seems much more aggressive than that. The language simply says that a person can drive an automated vehicle on Maryland roads, or a fleet can, or a taxi service, or any of these things are authorized to use these vehicles as long as they meet fairly minimal safety standards, which amount to abiding by state and federal laws and being capable of a minimal risk condition in the case of a failure. Now, MVA may have been discussing this for some time, but the state really hasn't established laws about this, hasn't passed laws allowing or forbidding AVs on state roads, unlike other states. So we don't have a network of those kind of laws. The federal government, more unfortunately, really hasn't established a set of laws or regulations. To Senator West's point, there's no federal authorities that judge whether the cameras and these things in their windshields are actually safe and effective. We only really have Waymo's say so on that. And a lot of experts outside the industry are much less sanguine about the safety of these things. There's footnotes in my statements. Also, the bill, just quickly, there's no limits on the number that can be deployed. There's no different limits on the size. So we could have all kinds of AV trucks as well as small cars. And it also specifically forbids local jurisdictions from restricting these things or the state agencies. So I'm concerned that, if there's a safety problem, local jurisdictions wouldn't be able to respond. Happy to try to respond to concerns. There's a lot here, I know.
All right, let's do Senator James and then Senator Folden.
Thank you for coming here and being far more articulate than most of us in what we're worried about, not criticism.
Well, many of you raised some of the concerns.
Well, you did, but you did a nice job. But here's what I'd like to know. So the panels that are supporting it said, look, this is the same in 25 other states, which is why I'm so terribly interested in the language, how it was drafted, how it was thought through, because my reaction is the same as yours. I can see moving the ball forward in Maryland on automated vehicles. Absolutely. I'm kind of with that. I just don't think this language, there's just a million things you could say and do and write, and I just thought, confusing. Seems like we're talking about things way in advance of before we work through the problems. But you may be more familiar than me about whether this language, which I was assured is in 25 other states, makes sense, and you may be familiar, and I was wondering if you could speak to this language.
Well, a number of states have authorized the use of AVs. Many of them have had some high-profile problems. There have been issues in San Francisco and in Arizona. San Francisco, famously, there have been a lot of cars stranded in the streets.
I've read about that.
Causing a lot of public outrage, in addition to some pedestrians who've been hurt and killed. And, as Senator Folden suggested in his questions, currently, we don't allow those kind of vehicles to operate on Maryland roads, and lurching all the way to allowing essentially an unlimited number and an unlimited size of these things on our roads, while we're still working to develop the regulations, it seems to me, it is a fairly radical step.
Sort of the cart before the horse, or horse before the cart.
That's how I haven't seen the amendments, and I'm happy to talk about those.
But you just have, I'll do this myself, but I'm going to look at what the other states have done. You're not familiar with this language.
I'm not. I think it's more or less standard language that some of the AV companies are promoting to try to get these things authorized in various states.
Sure they did. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Folden.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for coming down. Really appreciate your input. And actually, your testimony made me think of something else in connection with what was said previously. And if I'm not mistaken, the areas that these fully autonomous vehicles where they said they were already in operation, none of those experience any measurable season changes, such as snow.
Mostly Sunbelt areas, places like
so they don't have like snow and ice, like sleet. And so we haven't had an opportunity to also see the effects of that, which would be covering the cameras that the senator was worried about.
There's a woman named Missy Cummings, who's a well-known engineer, who's written extensively about this. The New York Times has written about her findings. She writes about how brittle and ineffective all these high-tech cameras on this technology seem to be, how often they seem to grossly malfunction. There was a study last year that found that the overall rate of crashes was slightly lower with AVs, but they were 5 times more likely to get into crashes in low-light conditions, and twice as likely when they were turning. They seem not to handle unusual conditions or conditions that they're not carefully programmed to handle very well. They probably don't handle bad weather, snow,
Yeah, I mean, is it, so like I know, the one lady that gave testimony, she has a 2013 vehicle. I know I have something that's, I drive a truck. I know it's shocking to most, but it's, a GMC, and it's got a lot. And when it's snowing or it gets a lot of ice on the front of the truck, it'll start alerting like all the systems, like parking, the speed sensing system's not working, the lane detection system's not working. It'll just start constantly alerting me because of the environmental factors that it's no longer, it's literally shutting down piece by piece by piece. So I think that that's a pretty significant concern of mine in this area specifically, which does see the extremes of both on the spectrum of.
Right, and again, where they've been deployed has mostly been placed relatively unchallenging.
Yeah, that.
I think.
Thank you for that. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Senator Love.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Speaking to states that have substantially similar authorizations, moving beyond just where Waymo, one company, is operating, Utah, North Dakota, South Dakota, Pennsylvania, they all have snow and ice and sleet, correct? It's a yes or no question.
Yes, they do.
Okay, thank you. And then, Franz, you said that, you know, this is jumping the gun because we have no laws authorizing it, but that's exactly what this is. So that statement I find very confusing.
Well, I mean, as I read the bill, it authorizes now the deployment of these vehicles on the roads. It says only that they have to follow state and federal regulations and the minimal risk condition. But at this point, I mean, the state regulations are underdeveloped. And as you may know, NHTSA has really, safety advocates around the country are really highly critical of it for having not developed safety standards. And by the way, self-driving car entrepreneur Elon Musk just fired a lot of the people at NHTSA, so it's going to be an even less strong condition to exercise oversight going forward. So right now, I think we have fairly minimal laws, of existing laws to regulate these.
So what you just said was that you have to abide by state regulations. We don't have those yet, which means no car is going to be operating on our road until those regulations are set up, correct?
I'm not sure. You know, the way.
That's what you just said.
Okay, the way it was characterized in the House hearing, my impression was that Waymo.
None of us were sitting in the House hearing.
Waymo was suggesting that 6 months from now they were going to be putting these things on Maryland roads. Maybe I misunderstand.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you so much. Any further questions? All right. Seeing no further questions, thank you, Mr. Schneiderman. That concludes the hearing for Senator Love's SB 949. I will now move to Senator Hedelman, who has a local bill, which will go very quickly. So Senator Hedelman, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. For the record, I'm Shelley Hedelman, Senator from District 11, and yes, it is unusual that I come before you today with a local bill. This really came to my attention because a community in my district was having problems with people who were driving in an unsafe manner in the small community that is comprised of private roadways. It is a neighborhood called Queen Anne's Village. It is right off of Reisterstown Road in Owings Mills. It is about 405 townhomes, and the leadership of that community, that HOA, came to us saying, we've been getting lots of complaints about people driving up and down the streets, and they do have some traffic control, they do have some road speed bumps, and we can't do anything about it, and we're really frustrated. And we have called the police. They have an excellent relationship with the local police department, and the local police department has said, our hands are tied. We cannot go into the community to enforce your speed limit or your other driving safety laws. So this bill, and you have amendments that really narrows the legislation to apply only to this one community. What we learned in the course of our Baltimore County Senate delegation hearing on this is that our county has literally a few thousand private roads, and they thought that this would be too overwhelming to allow the entire county, to allow law enforcement to have that ability to enforce traffic laws in all of those private roads, so which they do in Calvert County, by the way. So what we're doing is just doing a pilot program allowing the police, when they are called and when there are complaints in this one particular community, to be able to come in and enforce traffic laws. It is a pilot. The county is supportive of its limited nature. The Baltimore County delegation, which is a very eclectic and interesting group of folks, voted on this unanimously. The committee should have a letter to that effect. And I ask you to help my constituents and to keep them safe by supporting Senate Bill 915. We have no other witnesses, and I'm happy to answer questions if you have any.
Any questions for this sponsor of the local bill? All right. Thank you, Senator Heddle.
And I'd like to thank Senator West for his support on this, too. Thank you. And Senator Sidner. I'm sorry. Baltimore County. We got Baltimore County in the House, strong on JPR.
That's right.
Thank you. I'm sorry.
That concludes the hearing on
Thank
Senate
you very
Bill
much.
915. We'll now move on to my bill, Senate Bill 834. We're not sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate it. Before us now is Senate Bill 834. We passed a similar bill to this a number of years ago. The vote on that bill was 9-1 with Senator Casserly voting against it. I think Senator Casserly's here today, so if he wants to testify against this bill, we'll give him the business. But so let me kind of walk you through a quick concept and why the bill is in front of us. So in Maryland, we have a dealership and manufacturer structure for selling cars. Most states have this structure, and it's long-standing. And so you're going to hear about kind of the relationship between the two and say, why are we involved in this? These are two sophisticated parties. They can work this out for themselves. But the answer is we have long since regulated this industry, and once you're in, it's difficult to get out, and we want to do right by both the dealers and the manufacturers. And I'm especially partial to our dealers who are here today testifying on behalf of this bill, because our manufacturers are not bad actors, but they are not based here in Maryland. They're based internationally or domestically in other states. We don't have any auto manufacturing for consumers here in Maryland, but we do have our incredible dealer network. These are active members of our community who do great work, not only selling vehicles to our constituents, but volunteering in our community. I'm joined by the folks from our Fitzgerald dealerships. They are now owned by their employees, but was previously owned in part by my constituent, Dottie Fitzgerald. Many of you know Dottie, and she runs spay and neutering programs in our community. The Fitzgerald dealership, also famous for helping people install child car seats, and all at their own expense. As someone who has had twins and had challenge installing these car seats, and like I went to a lot of schools, I figure I could figure this stuff out. I could not. I took it to Fitzgerald. They did it well. So here's what the dealerships are facing. There's a concept in the industry called MAP, a minimum allowable advertised price. And what that means is the manufacturers don't allow the dealerships to advertise a price of an individual vehicle below a certain amount if they're using money that comes from the manufacturers for advertising purposes. And so that's why you see sometimes local advertisements that are done by a dealership or by a collective of regional dealerships. And by taking that money from the manufacturers, they are obligated by their contract with the manufacturers to not go below a certain price in advertising that vehicle. Now, you might think, I think that's objectionable. I actually don't think that's objectionable. I agree with the manufacturers. If you take Toyota's money to advertise their vehicle, and you have agreed to the terms that you're not going to advertise those vehicles below a certain price. So that makes sense to me. The question comes as to what constitutes advertising. So advertising, of course, includes commercials on television and radio and podcasts. But the issue before us is, what about just the basic dealer website where an individual price is associated with an individual VIN? Is that advertising? And I would argue that that's not advertising. That's just the dealer telling you the price of the vehicle. It's not meant for mass consumption. It's meant for a human being behind their computer looking up the price of that particular car. Now, when we passed this bill a couple years ago, we basically said a dealership can advertise an individual price on their individual website for a specific VIN without violating MAP requirements. But in anticipation that perhaps the House or some members of this committee may have concerns, we actually took a step back and simply, this bill in front of you simply requires the website to say, or allows the website to say, I should say, that that this price that you're seeing is not allowed to go below the minimum advertised price, and but the car might be for sale below that price. Contact the dealership to figure out if that's the case. So that's it. It's a simple information bill. I think it is modest in scope, but powerful in that it allows consumers to make decisions with the information that they have, and that is accurate. With that, Mr. Chairman, I will turn it over to my panel and ask for a favorable report on Senate Bill 834.
Thank you very much, Senator. You did my job for me. I'm going to go. I appreciate that very much. My name is Rob Smith, and I'm the president of Fitzgerald Auto Mall. We have 1,300 employees and their families in the state of Maryland. I'm very proud to be in an organization where the owner decided to sell the business to his own employees and entrust us with its care. We have built our business on transparency and trust, and the price you see is the price you pay. That's what consumers expect. It's what they deserve. But there are outdated policies like the minimum allowable advertised price that work against transparency, that can artificially inflate the price by $1,000 or more. And they even prohibit dealers from hinting that the lower price may be available in the showroom. Mind you, this is only on the internet, not on the cars themselves that are physically in the showroom. I can put any real price on there. Why? Because the manufacturers do punish dealers if they break the rules by pulling critical, by putting the incentives out there. And it's a system that is, some people question, but how can we compete fairly when we're blocked from telling the truth and not putting the real price out there? We just want to educate the consumer. Senate Bill 834 does not ban MAP and control what they do. It does a simple thing. It prevents manufacturers from punishing dealers from informing consumers that lower prices may be available. This isn't about deceptive advertising or bait and switch. It's about honesty and fairness. The rules still apply. Everyone has to follow the law. And why would anyone oppose telling the truth? So we are for the bill, and I appreciate you hearing my testimony.
Thank you. Franz Schneiderman, Consumer Auto, Maryland. Thank you, members of the committee, for the opportunity to address the bill, and to Senator Waldstreicher for bringing it and working with us for price transparency and to serve consumers better. This bill is really all about price transparency and helping consumers get access to discounts that are available on cars, but that current pricing rules may make it hard for them to discover. That's really important in an environment where new cars particularly are so expensive. Their average cost is more than $49,000 now. We need access to every discount we can get. These MAP rules set a high floor and prohibit dealers from advertising or listing on their own websites prices that are lower than that given high amount. That means that the prices you see online are often very high and not very competitive. That also means they're often $1,000 or $1,500 or more higher than the actual prices available in the showroom, where there aren't those kind of restrictions. That distorts the price information available to consumers, makes it hard for them to learn about these kinds of discounts. It interferes with the ability of dealers like Mr. Smith and Fitzgerald that want to compete for lower prices and to give people better deals. So, it's anti-competitive. It's contrary to transparency. This bill, I think of as a kind of a compromise. The Senate twice passed laws that would have forbid enforcement of MAP rules altogether. This bill doesn't do that. We had trouble with that on the House side. It simply enables dealers to put language on their websites saying that lower prices may be available in the showroom. It's not about auto fraud or bait and switch car sales. Those things are still illegal, but it should give consumers better access to price discounts, make the car market more competitive. Thank you for your consideration, and I'll respond to any questions.
Thank you, sir. So we don't have any questions? Okay. All right, so seems as, oh, so we do have questions now. All right, so Senator Sidnor.
I was struggling because I think it may have been answered, but we have seen something like this for a number of years. Yes. How did this happen? Because I remember this being kind of contentious. So what?
So I don't think it's contentious in this committee. We passed a similar.
No, I'm not talking about us. I'm talking about the industry, the players, and not necessarily, you brought them together, and it seems there's no disagreement on this one.
That's correct.
So I was curious what happened.
Oh, you're saying within the dealership
Yes,
industry?
not here.
Sure. So I think some of the dealerships prefer this version of the bill, which is more informational and says, hey, a lower price may be available, contact your dealer, versus our previous bill, which allowed them just to put the lower price on the website. Gotcha. And I think that's what brought all the dealers together.
Thank you.
And I just want to recognize Alex Scholl, who represents the Fitzgerald Group, for working with the other dealership groups to make sure everyone was on board.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Senator Muse, you have a question? Okay. All right, being that there are no other questions, we're going to now move forward with the favorable with amendments, and we have Bill Kress and Joshua Fisher, so if you guys can come on up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm Bill Kress again, here on behalf of the Alliance for Automotive Innovation. We are favorable with amendments, but quite frankly, the amendment would say if the dealer wants to do this, then they're not entitled to cooperative advertising dollars. And so why do we say that? Let me give you a little bit of background on why this is important, not to Fitzgerald, but to all the dealerships in your districts, because we set a minimum advertised price to protect every dealership outside of Mr. Fitzgerald, who happens to own 17 dealerships, happens to have economies of scale, and happens to often be able to price their cars slightly lower than other dealerships. So we're doing cooperative advertisement for the manufacturers, for all the dealerships in the state. And to get that advertising, the agreement is you use the minimum advertised price. And so that's only fair. And we do that to protect everyone. That's the issue of fairness in this bill. Frankly, this bill has been killed many times in the House. Look, if you want to protect the dealers in your own district, this bill is not favorable to your dealerships. With respect to, and I do appreciate the Vice Chair talking to me about the bill and recognizing there's no longer any manufacturers in the state, I would point out that we're the #1 port in the nation for import and export of cars through the Port of Baltimore. The economic engine of the state is partly powered by the auto industry. And so I'll leave it at that. You know the issues, and we would respectfully say either vote unfavorable in this bill or provide an amendment that would allow us to withhold those advertising dollars if Mr. Fitzgerald wants to advertise prices different from the minimum advertised price. Thank you.
All right. Are there any other questions from anybody in committee? And Josh,
he's not here.
He's not here. Okay. All right. Being that there are no other questions, we'll wrap up this hearing on Senate Bill 834 and move forward now to Senate Bill 742, Vehicle Laws, Inspection and Requirement, brought by Senator Will Smith.
Promise Senator James I'd be quick, so we'll roll through. All right. There you go. All right. I guess the panel can come on up if you have one. So Senator Smith here to enter into the record Senate Bill 742, fairly straightforward. The committee is familiar with this issue. Essentially, the bill requires or changes our current requirements for registration for biannual inspection of certain motor vehicles after they're 6 years, after their model make is 6 years old. So every 2 years, you'll have to have an inspection here in Maryland. Under the current regime, only used vehicles that have to be must be inspected and certified before being sold or transferred to the new owner. And then sellers who obtain a certificate of inspection from an authorized inspection station, and the buyer or transferee then submits that information to the MVA. And then once that happens, you never have to have an inspection again. Currently, I think 13 states have inspections after the buy date, so I think it's 13 states. You'll see in the testimony or in the record, there are letters of information from MVA and from the Maryland State Police. I'm in the process of reconvening MVA, State Police, and the stakeholders you see here. Actually, we'll probably get together this afternoon to work out some of the some amendments that I'm going to discuss in a second. But just for reference, there are 1,500 inspection sites across the state of Maryland. And if each site were to do 2 inspections, that would be something like 720,000 cars that the current capacity has the ability to absorb. And so when we're discussing the ability of this change, I think that's something to keep in mind, that there are, and you'll hear the testimony that comes behind me that says that there are enough resources. Maryland State Police, in the fiscal note, talks about a resource problem or a resource challenge, and I think that as we discuss some potential forthcoming amendments, we may be able to assuage some of their concerns. But let me just walk you through the bill. The components of the bill are pretty similar, pretty simple. You've got to get the vehicle has to be 6 years old, and then after it reaches its 6th year, you have to get it inspected every 2 years. The bill calls for brakes, steering columns, horns, mirrors, lights, windows, windshield wipers, speed monitors, and seat belts to be inspected. Right now, I'm suggesting that if you look on page 3, that you're going to strike lines 21 and 22. This part of the statute, or the structure of the statute, mirrors what we do for emissions in Maryland. And so the remain for 90 days is not going to be necessarily relevant to what we want to do in the bill. So the potential idea to address the Maryland State Police's concern is to say, hey, look, starting in X outlying year, we will start with vehicles that are however many years old, inspecting them every 2 years, and grandfathering in every other vehicle that's on the road right now. So you're kind of starting from fresh. And so the capacity issues, we think, can be addressed that way. But I think what you're going to hear in the testimony behind me is that we think that there's somewhat of a disagreement in terms of the ability for us to handle, as a state, the capacity to inspect all of these vehicles. I'll also just point the committee to some of the testimony that's been submitted for some of the statistics for the period. And I think, Franz, this was in your testimony from 2017 to 2019. There were a range of about 10,000 auto accidents in Maryland that were due to some sort of default within the vehicle that could have been corrected or amended through an inspection, would have been caught. As I mentioned, our New York, Virginia, Hawaii, Illinois, Louisiana, Maine, North Carolina, New Hampshire, Massachusetts, Pennsylvania, Texas, Utah, Vermont, and Virginia all have this type of regime for inspections. Maryland is certainly an outlier in never requiring an inspection after your vehicle goes through that initial transfer process. So with that, Mr. Chair, I ask for the committee for a favorable report, and I'll hand it over to my panel, and then I'll stick around for questions.
Mr. Vice Chair, members of the committee, my name is Peter Kitzmill. I'm the president of the Maryland Automobile Dealers Association. We represent 300 franchise new car and truck dealers across the state of Maryland. There are 23,000 employees here today in support of Senate Bill 742. This is a safety issue. It is something that we do need to address. I get at least 2 calls a month from my dealers saying, I've got somebody on a service drive with a car that is not safe. I don't want to let them leave, but they're not willing to get it repaired. And that happens all the time. The dealers in Western Maryland will tell you that our surrounding states, Virginia, West Virginia, Pennsylvania, all have an annual safety inspection. And those cars, when they take them in and trade, are in dramatically better condition than a Maryland car. And I'm going to give you 2 quick examples as to why this is important. One is, one of my dealers talked to me today. He puts a 2025 Acura MDX into loaner service, has it for 3 months, 3,000 miles, takes it out, has to get Maryland State inspected, puts it on the lot, sells it to a customer. That customer then keeps the car for an average of 13 years. That's what the average age of vehicles is at this point now. And so no one looks at that car for 13 years. And that transitions into the second example. As we transition more and more to EVs, these EVs weigh incredibly more than ICE vehicles. I have an EV. I had a tire issue yesterday. Now it's a flat tire. But when I went to fill it up, you have to put 50 pounds of pressure per tire on an EV to make it run right. That means the tires are going to last dramatically less. And somebody not looking at their tire for 4 or 5 years, you don't want one of these 9,000-pound vehicles careening down the road with a tire that's already worn out. And this biannual safety inspection, which is, again, our surrounding states are annual. This is biannual and starts 6 years out. They start after the first year. So I think this is a critical safety issue, and we would ask for a favorable report.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, Bill Castelli, also on behalf of the Maryland Automobile Dealers Association, also in support of the legislation, and just very quickly to address a point that the chairman had made regarding the capacity. The fiscal note talks about there maybe being about 1.8 million cars, vehicles that would need to go through the inspection. So if you're doing 2, 3, 4 inspections, depending, and it's not just the 1,500 current inspection stations that you have right now. You've got another 300 automobile dealers that can run these inspections as well. So we do think there's plenty of capacity. I will say that, you know, a GAO report that was issued back in 2015, while it did note that it was difficult to quantify some of the benefits of these programs, definitely said that these programs help with safety. So for those reasons, we would encourage a favorable report.
Thank you, members of the committee, and Senator Smith for bringing the bill. My name is Franz Schneider. I'm with Consumer Auto. I strongly support the bill because I do think it should improve auto safety in Maryland, because we don't have an inspection requirement except when you purchase a car or bring it in from out of state. There's currently no obligation to review the safety of vehicles for ongoing problems. Cars are getting older and older because new cars are so expensive. The average age of a passenger car in the U.S. is now 14 years old. This bill, by requiring inspections of cars older than 6 years old, would give an opportunity to review the safety of those older vehicles, make sure they're operating safely. It would impose some costs on lower income drivers who rely on older cars, but it should also prevent small problems from becoming bigger and more expensive repair projects, and extend the life of cars. And replacing your car is even more expensive than repairing it. As Senator Smith mentioned, the Maryland State Police found that there were more than 10,000 accidents caused by mechanical defects between 2017 and 2019. That's about 3% of the crashes overall. NHTSA's figures indicate that mechanical malfunctions are responsible for about 2 to 7% of car crashes. If 5% of the car crashes in Maryland, about 600 people a year die, many thousands more are injured. That would be about 30 lives and many hundreds of injuries prevented if we prevent those. So, I think, the GAO report did find that hundreds of thousands of cars get repaired in the states that have these inspection requirements, including Virginia and Pennsylvania. So I think it does promote safety, and it's worth the cost, and I hope you'll support the bill. Thank you.
All right, thank you to the sponsor panel. I do have a question before I pass it on to my colleagues around the table. Around about how much does it cost to have your vehicle inspected?
So the bill calls for MVA to promulgate regulations that will adjust the proper cost. So I'll defer to the folks that do this, how much that might cost. But the bill calls for MVA to promulgate regulations too.
Like some places are roughly like $100, and then like everybody has a different cost right now.
What the current? You want to speak?
Are you talking about the current inspection?
Yeah, current inspection costs right now.
It does vary, and it is probably 100 to 150 because it's a much more extensive inspection than is what's contemplated in this bill.
All right, then I noticed for any vehicle that's over 6 years old, so what this pretty much does is kind of puts people in a position to go and have to buy another vehicle if they don't want to pay for an inspection every 2 years. Because you won't have to pay for it if it's the vehicle is less than 6 years old, correct?
So, I mean, that's certainly a much cheaper proposition to maintain your car than to buy a new car, but, yep.
All right. Thank you. I'm going to pass it on to Senator West, and then after Senator West, then we'll go to Senator McKay, and then we'll head back to the other side.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, or substitute chair.
Substitute.
Stand-in chair.
Sit-in chair.
Sit-in chair. There we go. I'm looking at the bill itself. On the page 4, it says the regulations adopted shall establish the maximum fee, but it doesn't. The regs don't, or the bill itself doesn't specify how such a fee should be computed, does it?
That defers that decision to MVA. I mean, much like, so it's modeled off of the emissions, how we structured emissions. MVA had that flexibility to develop those regulations, and similar deference would be afforded to MVA under
The
this.
state's facing significant deficits in the future years. Is it not possible that under this language, the administration could decide to deal with some measure of the deficit by establishing a significant fee?
Much like emissions, so that latitude is already there for emissions right now.
Right.
So I assume that's true, but that's true for a multitude of different fees and services that are required.
This bill gives the administration carte blanche to establish a fee of any size, just so long as there's a maximum, correct?
Again, that similar deference is given to how we do emissions as well.
So they could decide to make the fee $500 every 2 years if they wanted to.
I'm sure your constituents hear about it, we would legislate instead of defer for the regulatory process. Also, there's ALR process. So we're still involved in that, but the similar deference is afforded, again, in a multitude of different areas of the law to agencies ranging from DLR all the way through to MVA.
Most of the agencies, I'm on the AELR committee as are you.
Yeah.
And most of these come through regulations, and generally speaking, the people on the AELR committee defer to the decisions of the administration in determining what the fees are going to be. I can't remember a case in which we've pushed back so hard against a fee that they've gone back and they've lowered the fee.
I mean, I'm sure if there was an extreme fee like $500, that you and I would both assert ourselves and exercise our responsibility on that committee.
One would hope so.
Yeah.
So let's. How many cars in Maryland now are over 6 years old?
The fiscal note might.
I think the estimate was based on the inspection, so it's every other year. It would be 2 million inspections a year, so that would give you an idea as to how many are over 6 years and older.
Wouldn't
2 million inspections? 2 million? That old?
Yes. 1.8 to 2 million, I think, was the estimate.
So they're awful, and those people don't have to pay these fees currently. So we're talking about subjecting 2 million Maryland owners of cars per year to a fee that they don't pay currently if this bill passes, correct? And the hassle of taking their car to some place to get it inspected and sitting around for a while the inspection occurs, right?
Again,
is that fair to say?
So we're in talks. I mean, look, I'm not. Yeah, as that stands, yeah, of course. I mean, you're going to every 2 years you're going to have to go get an inspection, and that would apply to 1.8 million cars. But another option we're talking about is, I remember, and I know Senator Fulton wasn't here when you said this, but is pushing out the implementation to whatever year, 2032, and saying from that point, if your vehicle is 6 years from that point, then you have to have inspections for every 2 years, and all the current cars that are on the road right now would be grandfathered in. So all that number shrinks greatly, but as we move forward, we have inspections, say, for cars on the road, and less people impacted initially.
My final concern is state policy now is that from 2035 on, anybody buying a new car has to buy an electric car. And it's clear that most people don't want to buy electric cars. They're going to be forced to do it if they buy a new car. Isn't it possible that this administration or future administration could jack these fees up significantly in order to try to induce people to buy new cars and force them into electric cars?
As you know, that discussion is ongoing and forthcoming, but that's a topic of discussion in the administration right now. And I think in this climate, this legislature is going to be revisiting that decision early. So we'll see if we address that. But that's an ongoing discussion of some significant debate. I'll put it that way.
Yes. Okay. Thanks.
Senator McKay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So my question has to do with the inspection. And, sir, you might be better to answer this than the actual sponsor of the bill. Isn't it true that the inspection for a Maryland state inspection is probably 10, 15, 20% higher of what they check compared to the state of West Virginia or the state of Pennsylvania?
I think that's conservative. I think I can say without qualification, the Maryland state inspection, the regimen and what they check is the strictest in the country.
Yeah, I concur 100% with that. As I look at the bill, line 3 and, I'm sorry, page 3, line 9, it lists all the things we're going to check. Brakes, steering column, horn, mirrors, lights, windows, windshield, windshield wipers, speedometer, and seat belts. The information that we heard about safety in cars and all these different things, with all due respect, this is not going to help any of the safety concerns that you all have talked about. Just because a seat belt is working or not, the speedometer, windshield wipers, windshield, windows, lights, mirrors, maybe the steering column. And a lot of the steering columns may have to do with if there was in a crash, one of the steering columns normally takes an issue. The only one I can see that would be something that you'd want to be checking every 2 years is the brakes. Isn't all these things pretty much already taken care of by police officers who observe a car that isn't that those safety concerns addressed?
I've heard that, and again, I'd go back to the tire thing. I thought tires were included, but if they're not, we need to include them.
Yeah, tires. Maybe it's somewhere else.
So again, I think the evidence is pretty clear. The states that have annual safety inspections, my dealers will tell you all day long, those vehicles, when they're traded in, are in dramatically better condition than a Maryland vehicle that hasn't had anybody look at it for 13 years. And I agree with what you're saying in that, hey, checking the windshield wipers isn't going to, we'll tell they need a windshield wiper change, but that's not going to prevent an accident. But having somebody inspect the car every 2 years is going to at least bring to people's attention, you have a safety problem. Again, I go back to I take 2 or 3 calls a month from my dealers saying, hey, I got a car in the service lane that shouldn't leave here. And it's because it's an older car and it hasn't been inspected for 13, 15 years. I think that's what we're trying to get to.
Okay, but that's not addressed into these safety issues because it says windows, windshields, windshield wipers, speedometer. I can tell you that from West Virginia, their annual inspection is as lightweight as can be. And I will tell you, I disagree 100% that cars that are coming over from West Virginia into Maryland are in better condition. I can tell you that it's very easy to just go get tags in West Virginia and slap them on your car, and you're skirting all of the safety issues that the state of Maryland has created as an inspector. And matter of fact, anecdotally, if you see a car, an older car riding around with West Virginia tags, you know that that's more of a safety concern than a Maryland one. That's just been my experience. And for all disclosure, 24 years ago, a long time ago, I used to be a Maryland state inspector, and I'm really proud of what we've done with that. And I'm telling you, what you're asking here to be checked just seems to be an opportunity to say, hey, I want to upsell you on some mufflers, or I want to upsell you on something else, or it's time to go buy a new car. And so I'm not sure this is ready to put the burden on people. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator McKay. Senator James?
Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Chairman, for bringing the bill. I just want to I feel like I know what you're trying to do in general, and I think the bill is a good starting point, but I feel like it's very, very broad, and I've heard very good comments that I think are kind of revealing about what you're worried about. And I think we could probably advance that issue of trying to address what you're worried about without it being this particular bill in this particular version. And I know you're kind of working on some amendments, but after the hearing, I'd really like to have a kind of comparison of our surrounding states, Delaware, Maryland, Virginia, and West Virginia, not just the cost of inspections, but all the other costs that we put on drivers in the state vis-a-vis our surrounding ones, because really this is an indirect tax on people, no doubt about it. That's not your intention, but it's another cost of being alive in the state of Maryland and owning a car. So since we're talking about other states doing this, I think then if we'd like to look at other states, let's look at what they charge for everything else, registration, every other thing you have to do regularly, because I know we've increased ours a lot, and I'd like to kind of make sure that we cap some of these fees or adjust them if we're going to add to it. I do want to ask, I get your point about emissions, but to me, and I would like to hear a response, emissions is a very simple test. And that's why you can keep that cost down to about $20. So while it's nice to say you're going to defer to the MVA to work this out, I think that we ought to take a heavier hand and be price sensitive, because the emissions test is just not comparing apples to apples to car inspection. Don't you kind of agree? I mean, they're really different.
So as far as the pricing goes,
Yeah.
this is, I mean, again, we need to get into the details, but this
Yeah.
is the way we look at it. I have a number of my members that have dealerships in Pennsylvania as well.
Right.
Okay, and so Pennsylvania has an annual safety inspection. I think the average cost, what I was envisioning was probably $25.
Me too.
And the dealer, and certainly from the new car dealer perspective, in Pennsylvania, what they do, if you bought the car from Kitzmiller Chevrolet, then as long as you own that car, the dealer does the inspection for you complimentary. And that's the way the dealers, at least the new car dealers, are viewing this. So, I mean, you bring up a very good point about the charges to operate a vehicle in Maryland.
Right.
Talk about the process that works.
Yeah, we got to balance that. So
One of the reasons, I mean, this is a safety issue. I can't tell you how much a problem it is for people not to have their car looked at for 13 or 14 years. But leaving that aside, we're also looking at this from a Transportation Trust Fund revenue standpoint. And so if there was a $25 fee that could go to the state of Maryland, maybe that could offset the 8 taxes that the House has now. It's going to raise the price of buying a car about $3,000. So that's one of the other reasons that we're here, is because we think it might be a way to at least look at that issue.
So going on, thank you for being so honest about it, being a revenue raiser. But the next thing I just wanted to highlight is I have a BMW, and I take it in under the program the dealer offers. There is no way they are missing a single thing that needs to be inspected. I would like this program to take that into account. Yeah. For a driver like me with a car like mine, I should not have to get inspected, because I do 10 times more than that every 3 or 4 times a year with BMW. And as long as they send that, or I send that paperwork in, that ought to satisfy the requirements that you're after, because my cars are always extraordinarily well maintained. And so I think you've got to take into that. And the last thing is, I would like to also make sure that the inspection, as my dear friend from Western Maryland brought up, the nature of the inspection in the bill, and I know you're not wedded to it, Mr. Chairman, I know you're willing to change it. If there are 3% of our crashes are because of mechanical failures, it sounds like we collect data. I think we ought to get some data on how old the cars are and the nature of those mechanical failures. To me, that would probably dictate some of what ought to be in an inspection, because this is an inspection, geared toward, I assume, reducing traffic fatalities and injuries and harm. as opposed to having a great resale value, because better condition, when you said cars in West Virginia in better condition, they might be. They might be better condition to sell. I don't know if they're in better condition in terms of safety. So that would be my comment. And also, finally, you know, lots of cars, mine included, are designed to go 8, 10, and 12 years and be in pretty fantastic condition, which they are. But so I think we got to take that into account. You'd be willing to consider?
No, of course, happy to do that. Consult with traffic safety officers. We're going to convene a group after this hearing to delve into that. So that the list is happy to look at that list.
Thank you. Thank you.
Fully understanding the senator's affinity for West Virginia now. I understand that more in depth now.
West Virginia.
Secede to West Virginia. There you would be already there. You'd already be there. Yeah. But no. Look, to that point though. Look, if you have these inspections, what you don't want is what you're talking about in terms of field enforcement and writing a repair order. You don't want that, and I think that maybe that's what Sidnor might squint toward during his question. But you definitely don't want field enforcement for ensuring that cars are safe on the road. But.
Yeah. All right. Next question from Senator Sidnor, then we go to Senator Fulton.
Now, could you repeat what you just said? You don't want? What did you say?
I said if your cars are safe and they're inspected on a biannual basis, you're going to have less of a likelihood of someone pulling you over because you have some sort of a safety problem with your vehicle, and that's a positive thing.
Okay. So on page 3, lines 13 through 16. Looking at the mirrors, lights, windows, windshields, what would that inspection entail? I mean, what are you envisioning that inspection would entail? It's to make certain that for mirrors that they're there and functional.
I can speak to.
Yeah, just to make sure those whatever system it is, for example, the windshield wipers are functional. That the windshield wipers don't need to be replaced.
Mirrors.
The mirrors.
Yeah.
Same thing. To make, are they there? Are they cracked? Are they operational?
Windows and windshields?
Windshield would be, is the windshield cracked? Is there, you know, and also.
Are we looking at tint?
What?
Are we looking at tint?
The tint, I think the tint would probably be something that they look at.
Obviously, as I look at the bill, I'm looking at it with something else completely in mind, just dealing with primary and secondary offenses. So I would assume that if you're going through this process, and I think the chairman touched on this a little bit, you're less likely to be pulled over. There's less likely a need, I think, for law enforcement to have primary enforcement authority in under these circumstances. Would the chairman agree?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Sidnor. Senator Fulton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to point out that I had some really great questions that normally the chairman waits to ask his questions until the end, and that's how the leadership of this committee has historically operated. However, it seems that there's been a breach of protocol.
I'm watching you all text each other, and I'm like, what's going down? It's about to happen. It's going to happen.
Oh, it's going down.
I'm looking at Sarah. I'm looking at Fulton.
I didn't want to cause
Nick
extra
Charles got texted.
Yeah.
Hughes is like, yeah, I didn't even text him. And I'm like, all right, what's happening?
I didn't even text him. I gave him the look. I gave him the look.
Like, here it comes.
So
here it comes.
I just and I wanted to wait to turn my mic on because I didn't want you like stressing up there, Mr. Chair, all that time.
I knew it was coming though. I saw the ping.
You saw it coming?
Ping.
Yeah, it's coming. It was happening.
It's happening.
Well, so my question is, now that the chairman has apparently taken most of them, is I don't know if this was missed earlier or not, and I'm going to apologize if it was, but is there a mechanism that if for some reason the vehicle fails said inspection, is there a fee associated with it? Is it like a equipment repair order where they have a certain amount of time to get the deficiency corrected? Or could it be put out of service potentially?
No, the bill is silent on that, and MVA would have to promulgate that. The way that it does for emissions is that you wouldn't have your registration. It's your registration is what they use.
They take your registration?
You have to re-register your vehicle.
They would take your tags?
It's not registration, but
And you can't afford it because it turns out you are.
Oh, they would put a flag.
But there's no
like a pickup order.
No.
There's no fee associated with it.
The only fee with with the emissions is that there's a late fee if you do it late, but I don't think there's a fee if you fail it.
Then you get a,
Well, I
90 day.
thought you have to like get it recertified, and if you
Yeah,
don't
no,
do
if
that,
you
then
fail
you're
it, you have
beyond,
to take it and bring
then
it
you're
back.
beyond the scope. You got to go
Yes.
get the repairs done.
What is
Yes.
the fee for that?
It's the cost of the repair and then whatever it is, because it's then considered
If you're
late.
If you're late, I'm not sure what the amount is. I don't think there's a fee if you simply fail.
And then cure.
So-
If you cure it and bring it back, I don't think there's an extra fee.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask that. I didn't hear if that was in there, so I appreciate that response. And then the other thing is, I'm just kind of, I got to throw this out there, Mr. Chair, and I'm going to apologize. It's not you, Mr. Chair, because you already took most of it. But that at 2 million cars, even if it was $100, that's every other year per vehicle. That's $200 million. And I have to then question, because depending on how it's promulgated by the MVA, then there could be an opportunity that they could do something similar to a fee structure or a penalty in that. Could they not?
So we talked about that in terms of the regulations on ALR committee. So our hands are still in that process. And if something crazy happened, we have the ability to stop it.
Yeah, but crazy to you and crazy to me might be different. Like $500, I think we agree is excessive, right? Yeah. But if we're then adding on like another $50 per, after 30 days or whatever it be, then you're talking like another $100 million if all of them, that's obviously a stretch. But we've already doubled registration fees. We doubled these other things. I don't know. I don't know what the answer is. I just know that I understand where you're coming from, and I appreciate that. I just don't know that, this is another thing where we're trying to find seemingly more revenues.
I think, look, you refine this list and you kick out the implementation date. I think that's a solid.
They'll get some of the money.
Because I'll just ask this part, Mr. Kismore, you may know this better. But so when we do a current
Vehicle inspection, say it's $100, we'll just say, because I think most of them are 100 to 150, like you said. Say it's just a flat $100. What does MVA get any of that back? State get some of that? It doesn't all go to the inspection station.
It doesn't all go. It's a very small percentage that goes to MVA, but or being part of the program to be in a
Because does it go to ASED then? Automotive Safety Enforcement Division?
I think you're correct. I'll double check. I don't know that, but I think that is correct. The piece goes.
Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Part of that fee covers.
Are there any other questions?
Yeah.
All right, no other questions. Excuse me? Oh, no, we do have a favorable with amendment that's virtual. Mr. John Becker.
No, he's not. Mr. Becker signed up for every single bill we had today, and was not available for any of them. So he's not. I don't know. God bless, but he's not here.
All right. So seems as if we are now done with this hearing, and I think this will conclude us with our hearings for the day. We have a voting session after this, so we need to motion ourselves out of this. Is there a motion?
So moved.
All right. Second. All right.
Do it.
Let's go. 20-minute break.
No.